why is this episode called Episode Reboot? Well, I just want to explain to everybody that 2 years ago that I have did my very first film podcast episode to talk about the original 1954 film Godzilla. Also, some people call the original title GODZILLA. That I did this episode back in 2022 that I did with my podcast guest and Kaiju brother, Goji Fan 1998. And after I did the first episode, and yes, and I did rewatch that episode, and to be honest, I mean the video it was only a 38-minute podcast episode, and if you want to check out the original episode, just go ahead and click on the link in the description down below. And I did rewatch it, and to be honest, I did not do that much like research about the original Godzilla, and that means I did not study anything about the behind the scenes or anything. All I did is talk about some scenes from both cuts of the film, and to be honest, there was some moments in that I was kind of blanked a little bit. So I kind of decided to do a reboot about of my very first podcast episode that I did back then 2 years ago, and an honor to celebrate the anniversary of my podcast series. It's been 2 years since I done podcasting, and so I decided to make this episode to celebrate the anniversary of my podcast and for the 70th anniversary of Godzilla, and yes. Before we get started, but first we have some special guests here, and so far I only have 3 of them, as some of them might come later on that I invite. Please welcome to the monster reporter himself, Nick Adams. How's it going, Nick?
Good to be here, Brendan. Glad to see you again.
I'm glad to see you too. I haven't had you on my show since we talked about Godzilla versus Megaguirus.
That's right. A great episode. If you guys out there have not checked it out, and you need to be subscribed to Brendan's channel too.
Yeah. And please welcome to my other 2 guests who are like brothers to me. Please welcome back to my boys, Nathan from the Monster Island Film Vault, and Daniel from the Godzilla Novelization Project.
Oh, we're on. Oh, goodness. It's not what you think. Okay, here we go. Hi, everybody. What's up?
Danny, you're supposed to hide those under the mattress.
I don't have enough room under the mattress. I've got a lot of famous monsters of Filmlands down there already. Too much real estate taken up.
Okay. Nick, by the way, how's Planet X these days?
Planet X is doing well. I have many girlfriends. They all look alike.
Yes. And apparently you are my intrepid producer's spirit animal or something. I'm not sure.
And I hope I wasn't kept you guys waiting so long for my long talk. I was just
that was an awesome introduction. Are you kidding? That was awesome. Yeah. I'm so glad
no, dude. Yeah, I was gonna say, dude, the fact that you did that long introduction on your own shows how much you have grown as a podcaster in the 2 years that you have done this. By the way, happy anniversary.
Thank you, guys. And I hope I don't mix my worst. I hope I don't.
Oh no, you're fine. You're fine, dude. Come on. I had you on my podcast to talk about your favorite Godzilla film, Ebero Horror of the Godzilla versus Sea Monster, whatever you want to call it, and I was blown away by how well you did on that show. I was very proud of you, and I'm really proud of you for podcasting for 2 years, man.
Thank you, guys, and I'm glad that I'm finally get to do this episode just to celebrate the anniversary of my podcast and honored to celebrate the 70th anniversary of Godzilla. And yeah, that's why I'm trying to do this reboot to talk about the original 1954 Godzilla.
Oh yeah.
So are we just talking about the original? No King of the Monsters 1956?
No, just the original.
Just the original. Okay.
Because this is a reboot episode of my very first podcast episode I did back in 2022, which I already explained it. That I did with.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I did invite him, but so far he hasn't joined yet. I mean, hopefully he'll.
Hey,
come on.
if he doesn't want to hang out with a bunch of cool people to talk about a cool movie, that's his loss.
I did have him like 7 episodes or 8 back then.
Wow, he must be your most frequent guest.
Yeah, and Goji Fan 1998, if you are watching this, I just want to let you know that I miss you having on my show so much. That I hope I get to bring you back on my show someday in a future episode. So yeah, and I also had other news that I know, like, just not too long ago that I did do an unboxing episode about these 2 cool Bandai figures, and to be honest, I want to thank that I'm glad I did the unboxing video of the Kong Beast Glove Bandai figure that I did. That was actually my 100th video.
Oh yeah!
Wow.
Very
That's
nice.
cool that it lined up with your 2nd anniversary. That's really awesome.
Thanks.
Were those guys in a movie together? Like recently?
Oh yeah,
It's ringing a bell.
Were they?
Yeah,
these 2.
Yeah,
Like, maybe my illicit magazine can give us some answers.
Are you sure? I thought they were in an old movie, like 100 years ago or something.
Oh wait a minute, are you talking about these 2 were in the original 54 film?
No, I was talking about King Kong versus Godzilla, you goofball.
Before they were buddy cop.
Buddy cop. Well, Lethal Weapon was an inspiration for that movie. Although I will admit I've seen GXK several times now, and I just keep trying to figure out which one is Murtaugh and which one is Riggs.
Answer yes.
Yeah, I'm leaning toward Kong as Murtaugh because he definitely gives off I'm too old for this crap energy.
Right. A little bit.
So yeah, I've been glad I've been doing podcasting for 2 years, and then during that year in 2022, a few months after I did a few podcast episodes, that I joined one of your channels as a guest. I think me as a guest for the first time. I think it was on your channel, Nick.
Is that right? Really?
Yeah, I was the first guest on your channel. Like,
well, I am honored to be the first person to interview you. You did a fantastic job, and it's been great to see your growth over the 2 years. This is funny. This is your 2nd year anniversary here on YouTube. This is my 10-year anniversary. So 2014 is when I got started here, at least on YouTube. And but yeah, it's been a wild ride, and the ups and downs of the content creation world. You're definitely weathering those storms, and I know you're over 1,000 subscribers so far, which is awesome.
Yeah, speaking of storms, there was some storms like a few moments ago, and I was hoping I don't cancel the episode because due to the storms.
Aw.
No, it was more than wind and rain and lightning, much more.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure what it was. Nobody was sure.
Oh,
yeah. Well, at least it stopped now because Ghidorah already flew past.
Oh, is that what it was? Did they let him loose again?
They tend to do that. He's hard to contain.
Well, what is the board thinking on Monster Island anymore? Good Lord. The Ghidorah is not one you just let loose willy-nilly. I'm just saying.
Whose show is this? Wait a minute. I'm getting confused.
I know.
You don't remember, Daniel?
Oh, I remember. You're
on Lizard Productions.
Darn straight I am. 1,000 plus subscribers strong, 2 years in.
Well, people call it autistic lizard production because people know that I am autistic.
And I love, I gotta say, one of my favorite things, since we're kind of waxing a little bit about our the 2 years and memories, I love, you consistently make some of my favorite YouTube thumbnails. Like in the kaiju community.
Oh yeah,
like you make them fast, like lickety split, and they're always so like fun and eye catching, and you always have the logo in there. And did we remind me? Does he have a name? I thought we were maybe
we talked. Yeah, his mascot. We talked about it.
Yeah,
we've suggested names.
Yeah, did you come to a consensus on that? I don't remember.
Like what? Will we do episodes as a group?
No. The name of your mascot.
Sure. Yeah.
My
iguana or whatever he would be.
I know back. You know the logo here. I mean, this wasn't the original logo icon that I've created. I mean, this is a second creation that I created.
I remember because I have a business card with your first logo on it, because years ago at G-Fest, Brendan, you came up to me after a panel, introduced yourself, and gave me one of your business cards with your original logo on it. And it was another couple of years before we got to be really good pals, and you invited me onto your show. But I remember that logo because to this day I have that business card in my collection.
Wow.
I wonder if I still have it.
Wait a minute. I think it was this logo that was on there, wasn't it?
I don't think so. This was an older business card, because I have one of your newer ones as well.
Was it my original logo that has the lizard with the frown face and with the red shirt with?
I believe that's the one. Yeah, it's on a card. It's in my other room in a collection of all the wonderful business cards and things that friends at G-Fest.
Oh yeah, I think that was before I updated the business cards.
It was an old one, because I've seen your new one, and the new one is not the same one I have. So
yeah. I remember.
History. I have a piece of history right there.
Yeah, thank you for reminding me, Daniel. I did remember. I actually made those business cards by hand.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, that's really cool. I gotta up my game. I've never made a business card by hand.
Yes, which reminds me, I gotta make more business cards when I go to G-Fest.
Yes, you do.
Yes, you're hosting something. I'm not going to say what you're involved with yet.
I won't
talk about it.
But let's not give any spoilers.
No, we can't. We shouldn't, and we can't. But you are going to do something at G-Fest. That's all we can say.
Yeah. We've been sworn to secrecy, kind of sort of signed an NDA by proxy.
I didn't. You know what I mean? They asked us not to, so we're not gonna yet. But that's then, and this is now, and yeah.
But the mascot has no name, right? Just verifying that.
Yeah, it's just a lizard with the sunglasses, and
I'm calling him Puzzle Lord of the Puzzles. I'll kneel before the Lord of the Puzzles, because he's a master puzzle maker. Look at his shirt. I mean, he lives and breathes this stuff.
Yeah.
There you go.
And he's right behind me, right there.
I don't know why. I can't remember what name we suggested before, but he looks like a Frank to me.
I think we gave out some like very monstery sounding names, and then I was just like Steve.
Steve. He looks like a Steve. He looks like he could be a Steve too.
But who can say all kneel before Steve? I mean,
it doesn't quite have the same ring to it.
If his last name is Rogers, we should. I'm just saying.
Rogers. That is your only Captain America reference you're allowed for this stream, Nate. I will be keeping count.
Yeah, well,
I do what I want.
Well,
how many if that's the case, how many Godzilla references am I allowed?
As many as you want, because it's literally the name of the movie we're talking about.
Obviously.
Yeah.
I just had to confirm.
Well, if you're gonna make
novelizer of Godzilla things.
If you're gonna make up a Godzilla pun, like we should just call it Punzilla.
Punzilla.
There you
King
go.
King of the knee slappers.
Yeah. But,
here you go.
Yeah. So, oh my gosh, we're
Punzilla. I feel like if Punzilla was a real thing and he just shows up and just starts making puns, he would just defeat everybody. The only one who would give him any trouble would be Ghidorah because he has to throw 3 puns, one for each head. Either that or he just gets. Why is his name escaping me all of a sudden?
Karma.
Maybe. No, the third head, the dopey head.
Kevin.
He just needs to get Kevin to laugh, and then the other two will just give up.
Yeah. Well, I can say we already gone through like 15 minutes, so since this episode, I'm finally gonna do this almost over an hour or two, whatever, guys. How long the episode we're gonna do it, and since I did my best of doing research and studied this time, not like my very first episode, so let's talk about how we discovered this film for the first time, just like I did in all of my previous episodes that I did for over 2 years. To talk about how we discovered when we were kids back then. And
that's right. You should go first. You should go first. Tell us.
Nathan, are you okay?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Oh, because you kind of look like you were looking at something.
I'm looking up notes I have from when I did a podcast on this, just to make
sure. Well, I would really love to re-talk about the history of how I discovered the original and very first Godzilla film ever made by Toho. That I remember that I think it was on my 70th birthday party, and I remember when I was a kid, I did have birthday parties that the whole family came over and they gave me presents and they gave me a few toys and movies, and I actually got a birthday present from my mom, and I remember it was a little box, and when I opened it, and I was shocked that I've gotten the original Classic Mania DVD collection of Godzilla films.
Wow.
I don't know if you guys remember those. I mean,
I still have them.
You mean this one? Well, I mean, it's not the whole box, but it's just the one DVD.
Yeah, I mean, before the 2016 update,
the yellow one,
the green, green covers or whatever,
the green and yellow ones. Yeah,
those.
That reminds me.
The ones that have Rodan, Mothra versus Godzilla, and Godzilla's Revenge, Godzilla King of the Monsters, and Terror of Mechagodzilla. If you guys remember those.
Oh yeah, those ones.
Yep.
There we go.
Yep, that's the one.
That's the one. I've got the rest of them, but I'm just grabbing that one. But yeah, so this is the one you first saw the film on.
Yep, that's
awesome.
Yep, I'll never forget that. I remember that my mom recorded me of opening my very first Godzilla DVD collection I got. I was like, "Wow, Godzilla!" Yeah,
I'm
my
still
mom
like that sometimes.
And my mom actually recorded me on a home video. Yeah. And I'll never forget that she actually recorded me of me watching Terror of Mechagodzilla when I was a kid. And but we're talking about the original 54 and the US 56 Godzilla film. And so I did not watch the original right away after I opened my present. I just watched that film, like a few days after, and I remember it was all black and white, and I thought there was going to be more monsters, but no, it was just Godzilla. It kind of makes me think of my very first Toho Godzilla film I ever watched, Godzilla 1985.
Very similar.
Yeah, but it is the US cut version that I watched. So that's pretty much so far I had to talk. Oh, wait a minute. I just remember. And I did watch the original, Honda's original cut that that Criterion released it in 2011 or 10 that they released it on Blu-ray.
It was around 2011.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I did watch the original Japanese uncut that Criterion release.
Oh, it's not showing up very well.
Yeah, that's the one. And so yeah, I did watch the original Japanese and with subtitles and yeah, I did see it.
Yeah, there it is. I got it to work.
And and I did watch it and I like both versions and I'll never forget that I think it was back a few years ago, I think 2016 or 17, I don't remember, but I remember on Godzilla's birthday, I did watch the original cut on every November 3rd on Godzilla's birthday. I remember back around that year, 2017, I was watching the original uncut version when I was in bed. I was about to go to bed, watching it, and I kind of fall asleep right in the middle of Godzilla's rampage. It made me fall asleep.
Oh man.
Yeah, and
it's like a dose of melatonin watching all that fire and destruction and the sheer weight of the metaphor crashing down around you.
It's a metaphor.
It's a metaphor.
Oh, that's a joke we should have used in the Hedera episode.
We did, because I made that for Hedera and I didn't use it. Rats. It's okay.
Yeah. Well, since I already share my thoughts of how I discovered this film for the first time, let's see who gets to share their thoughts on how they discovered this film. Eeny, meeny, miny, moe, catch a fella, fight, all that, you are it.
Oh, hi. I guess that'd be me then. Please stop poking the top of my head. Thank you. All right. So I have kind of a similar-ish story, but it goes back to, gosh, I would have been six, I think, when I saw this film for the first time. And it was the English cut because it was, most people are in our general age bracket and older are going to have seen King of the Monsters first. That's just how it is. Because the Japanese version of the film was not widely accessible up until 20 years ago. So when I first saw the film, it was on tape and it was part of the first batch of films I saw after initially getting inspired to find more of these things. I've chatted about it on your show before, but I started with Godzilla 2000, didn't get to finish it, and my mom was nice enough to take me to my local library to help feed the growing hunger, because not only did I want more, but I had I didn't have closure to that one movie, right? So I needed more. So I was thrown into the car with my brother, and we were taken to our local library, which, of course, at the time had a VHS section. And my local library was my video store. So I have a lot of quote-unquote, video store memories from my library. And we picked out 3 films that day. We picked up Mothra versus Godzilla, and it's Godzilla versus the Thing version. I picked that one out. And then my brother picked out Monster Zero. And then we also, just to round it out at nice even 3, brought home this one. And this is the exact one, the Scimitar version.
That.
Yeah.
That cover, it almost looks like the 84 and
it is,
because it is.
That's absolutely the Cybot.
Yeah.
Peter Bollinger is the artist who did all of these covers for. Yep. Check out Nick's. There he is. It's the same face.
Oh,
yeah.
Is that the new one?
That face just says, "I'm judging you right now."
Isn't that the new one that just came out?
I'm muted. Sorry. Yes,
No, you're okay.
that would be the favorite sculptors line.
Mm-hmm.
Just came out.
Oh,
Beautiful.
I wanted that, but due to money issues and
It's a beautiful figure.
And those X Plus figures, they are expensive.
Yeah. It was, the pre-order came and went, and it was one that I could not resist. But you'll hear all about it on the unboxing video. It should be up tomorrow. Sorry.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
gonna be watching that. That's cool. Yeah, all of the Peter Bollinger art for the Scimitar tapes use variations on this. Some of them are a little vaguer, but you can definitely see the 1984 version and all that. They did the same thing with a couple of other tapes because 84 was just a very popular face to slap on there. I had no context for that at the time. I didn't know there was such a movie as Godzilla 1985. And honestly, after watching a chunk of 2000 and then watching Mothra versus Godzilla and then Monster Zero, jumping from those very actiony, colorful, more fantastical films right into the very dour black and white version was kind of a whiplash for 6-year-old me. But I knew that I was watching something that was very different and very significant. I wasn't quite sure what it meant at the time at 6 years old, but I watched it maybe only once or twice during my childhood and then opted to get some of the more colorful ones. And then later on, I ended up finding this guy, which I held up later. This is the standalone classic media version, which was marketed as containing the original Japanese masterpiece, the debut of the 54 film in Region 1. And so, of course, this set has both cuts in it on 2 different discs. And when I got this set, it was initially because it had both, and I wanted to see King of the Monsters again. But naturally, not too much later after that, I put in the original film, which ended up being the very first Godzilla film I ever watched subtitled in Japanese. This was the beginning of my journey into that, because once I hit, I want to say early high school, I'd finally gathered all the Godzilla films. I'd seen them all the films that existed up to that point, 2007, something like that, and 6 or 7. And I was like, well, now what? And the obvious answer was to re-experience the whole franchise again in the original versions. And I started with this one and was immediately, as most people are, hit by the magnitude of this film and the power of this film. And that was around the time that I got Dave Callett's A Critical History and Filmography of Toho's Godzilla series. So I went into it with context and that I didn't, necessarily have before, and left the film a completely different kind of Godzilla fan than when I'd gone into it. And, now what can you say? It's just, it's a magnificent piece of cinema.
So much ink has been spilled on that film.
Oh yeah. It's hard to say things about it that haven't been said a million times, but I'd like to think that those same things will continue to be said in new and interesting ways, which is why I love coming on and talking about these things. It doesn't matter that everybody and their brother has written something. It doesn't matter. This is a wonderful film to talk about.
Yeah, it is a classic. This is the film that really started it all.
Mm-hmm. And in fact, the year it came out, it was it the second biggest Toho film behind Seven Samurai? Because the big hits were Seven Samurai.
Yeah, Seven Samurai. It was released in the same year.
Same year, yeah.
Yeah,
very close together.
Well, Daniel, thanks for sharing your thoughts on how you discovered this film. I mean, we only got 2 people left who didn't share how they discovered it. So let's go with eeny, meeny, miny, mo, catch a how let's find his fall, mind myself, blah, 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 and you are it.
Okay. Hey. Oh, wrong direction. Okay.
Thank God mine was up. Otherwise, I would have been confused too.
Right. So, the first exposure, of course, was with the King of the Monsters version, 1956, because, that's what, of course, we could get in the 90s growing up. And that was, when I was looking for anything VHS tape that was out there to make part of the collection, because 85 was my first film. And of course they make references to 54, like this holy grail of a film, because it's like, I could not find it anywhere on VHS for a long time until the 98 Sony Godzilla came out. Then a lot more VHS tapes were available, but it was very much difficult to find during that time. There was others. There was about 1,000 copies of Megalon that you could find out there, each with a different cover art. And
Danny bought most of them.
I own dozens of those. That movie. I swear, it's horrible. I'm gonna write a book about it one day.
I just recently found a clamshell version of it, actually. So
yeah.
Oh my goodness, yeah. I don't know. Yeah, there's so many copies, but yeah, each artwork being very different and hardly any of them looking like the actual Godzilla that's in it. But
True.
So when I'd was looking for it, it was like an old episode of The Simpsons, and I'm saying old relative because I'm much older than all of you. So the thing about it was there was an old
boomer.
No, Gen X, but bad enough, right? So I was looking for this, and it was like this episode of The Simpsons, an early episode of The Simpsons, where Bart and Milhouse have this idol in the comic book genre, the radioactive man, if you know him. And so and they had an episode where they saved up enough money to buy Radioactive Man #1.
I remember that episode when they have a sleepover in the treehouse.
And they have to preserve it very carefully. They got to turn the pages with tweezers. They're very careful with it because it's this holy grail. And so I was like, this is kind of Godzilla, the King of the Monsters, the original Godzilla. Couldn't find it at a video store. Could not find it at any kind of for sale places. That had VHS tapes, used or new. And it was just like that. It was not available, and I couldn't even find it on TV. So it was like, and at that time there was very little of the internet. So even then you weren't shopping for things. In fact, during that time, shopping for things online was very much no. You don't put your credit card information on the internet. Now it's like we can't live without it, right?
Yep.
So,
But, Nick, and sorry to interrupt you. I mean, that's what I did for my Godzilla Blu-ray collections, because Blu-ray is so much better than DVDs. And what you explained about when Bart and Milhouse they turn the page carefully. I mean, that's how I felt about my Godzilla Blu-ray collections, because Blu-ray is popular in HD quality, and I've always protected them and carefully put the disc in the player. It's very carefully. I never put my fingers on the lens, and I don't want to get fingerprints on it.
Yeah, careful and meticulous with your home video. And of course, home media is becoming a thing of the past, and some of us out there have got to keep preserving it because we still love our box art. We still love our home video. Yeah. And we've got to preserve it as best as we can, because I mean, there's just still something about having a physical copy of it. And it's like, why do we keep the physical copies of these old media, even though we may not have a player that plays them? I do, but I'm also a video guy. So, but I did find out there, and this is the very one that I found. The Vestron video.
Wow.
And Steven's still got its sticker that's fallen off of the tape. But yeah, I remember finding this at a video store not far from where I live, actually. And it was like looking through all of the other sci-fi horror kind of things, if there's any other monster movies. If it was Harryhausen, if it was Toho, I had to pick it up. So I almost missed this one because, on its side, it was not exactly jumping out at me. But I was going to buy some other tapes, and then this one was there, and of the high dollar price of $20 in the early 90s. And so a middle school kid with an allowance, I had just enough to pick it up, put away all the other $5 tapes that I was picking up, because I was like, this is the one that I've got to take home. And interestingly, on the back is a shot of Godzilla from Megalon. With the tree.
I have a copy of Godzilla versus Megalon. No, that's wrong. I have a copy of Godzilla King of the Monsters with the Megalon Godzilla on the front.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Yes, I'll be talking about that when my turn comes.
How?
Mm-hmm. So yeah, but still kept the Vestron VHS tape, even though look at that cover art. How pathetic, but
you gotta love it though.
Well, they try to colorize something because I don't know. The Italians tried to do it, and
no, we don't talk about Godzilla.
Right.
I'll talk about it.
But real quickly, and then I'll wrap it up. So yeah, got to see the version with young Raymond Burr, Steve Martin, Perry Mason, whatever. And it was like, so it came all full circle. I was able to see the origins of Mr. Martin and his whole thing about covering Godzilla in Japan and what that whole story was leading into the 54 film, the 85 film, which was my favorite. And in the later 90s, when eBay became a thing, I was still trying to find the Japanese version of these films and was having very little luck. But again, after the Sony Godzilla came out, it was actually not too difficult to find some copies of them, but you couldn't play them in US players, or there was another issue with them and or importing them. But there was this weird technology called VCD, which DVD, of course, digital versatile disc. I forget how many gigabytes that they store, but VCD was literally the video information stored on less than a gigabyte. I think it was like 700 megabytes onto a CD format. Some players could play them, but your CD-ROM on your computer could play them, and it was the full movie. So it was highly compressed, so it wasn't exactly stellar picture quality, but I was able to at least see the original 54 without Raymond Burr and no subtitles, unfortunately. So I was watching it mostly for the special effects shots, of course. I wanted to see the monster action, but it was an educational experience nonetheless. I did not have the time to learn enough Japanese to figure out how the story was different or how the editing and all that was different. Now we have it in subtitled, which is a beautiful thing, and they've restored it to the best that they can on those classic media and the Criterion collection, which is, fantastic to have, and just brings a new life to that movie. And it also changes a lot of your perspective of that film. Nothing to say bad about Raymond Burr in the King of the Monsters version. That's still good for its own reason, but still love to go back to the original Japanese 54 version, to put the whole legend together, starting from the idea that this is this creature of destruction and that stark look in black and white, and trying things that have never been tried before on film. This man in this suit with the miniature buildings and all, just an incredible film. So yeah, the legend was born that day.
Yeah, it is. And wow, we're almost like, we're kind of like almost 38 minutes. That is exactly the same time as my very first episode. But we're doing this even longer, over an hour or two. Yeah, and we have a guest in the comments. Hello, Bumblebee Steve.
Bumblebee Steve.
And so thanks for sharing your thoughts, Nick. And we have a last person who will get to share how they discovered this film when they were young. It is Nathan.
I was to say, get the correct corner here. But
yeah, because this reflects.
Yeah. Oh, drop something over here. All right. Anyway, it's interesting that I can actually build off of a bit of what you guys were talking about. So, Danny, you mentioned I wonder if we're thinking of the same one. But you talked about finding an edition of King of the Monsters 56 with the Megalon Godzilla.
Yep.
Well, interesting thing, the King of the Monsters 56 was the first full Godzilla movie that I saw. My very first one was I saw the second half of Terror of Mechagodzilla.
There you go.
And that sparked my interest, so I started looking for more of these movies. And one of the first ones that I purchased was a Good Times Home Video 2-pack that included King of the Monsters 56 and, of all things, Godzilla versus Megalon. You want to talk about tonal whiplash.
Oh, wasn't that like a double feature?
It was a double feature, and the cover had an orange background, a close-up of the 73 suit, and then down below, it had the titles of both movies, I think, in the corners.
It's right over there.
Yeah,
I have two of them.
And you had Godzilla, the 73 Godzilla spewing regular fire at Megalon, who's just like, with a rock in between them. Yes, that one. Yeah, I no longer have it, but there have been fleeting moments where I jump on eBay and I think, you know what, I should just buy this one purely for nostalgia because it was the first Godzilla. Those were the first Godzilla movies I ever purchased.
Yeah. Do be aware there's a cover out there for the film that's nearly identical, but it's only Megalon. So be sure you read the fine print at the bottom.
Obviously, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So that was really exciting for me because my thought process, even as a wee lad, was if I'm going to dive into this franchise, I should start at the beginning. And as far as I knew, King of the Monsters 56 was the official beginning. I didn't find out until a little bit later that there were two versions of the movie. And the first time I did see the original Japanese version was the classic media DVD.
Yeah. And
so that was pretty exciting. But the other thing you guys are talking about, treating things with, like reading things with tweezers and treating them like holy grails. I have something a little bit similar to that. I don't know, Brendan, if I have talked about this on your show before. I know I have talked about it on mine, at least on a live stream. But I actually have the original Criterion release. I showed it off a little bit earlier, but I showed the back because, and I hope this shows up because I might have to manipulate a little bit. The front of my copy is signed by Takarada.
Wow.
And I got that at G-Fest, but to make it even better was I paid him for one signature, and I was but out of the blue, he just, because I'm standing there with the box, and I had the booklet there, and I was going to have him sign the booklet, and he did sign the booklet. But then as soon as he finishes it, he just grabbed the box and signed this too. So he gave me an extra signature, even though I only paid for one. And now I keep that one in a plastic bag to make sure that it doesn't get smudged or wrecked or anything. And if I want to watch the movie, I use the disc. I either use the classic media disc or I use the reissued version that Criterion did when they did their big box set. And this one stays under lock and key because especially since Takarada passed, I'm like, I can't afford to have this thing get
damaged. I did have a photo of me with Takarada that was back in 2018 or or is it 19?
It was 19 because he was supposed to be there in 18, but he got sick.
Yeah, I did have a photo of him on my wall over there, but I kind of moved some furniture because I got new windows a day or two ago, and all my photos are covered by my furniture and
so my story about discovering the movies actually, was pretty simple. I walked into I don't remember if it was a Walmart or a Kmart. Remember Kmart's? And I found it and picked up. I'm leaning toward it was a Walmart when I found it. So, so my story is pretty simple, like I said.
I do love that Takarada story.
It's absolutely amazing. I can't. That was one of the best celebrity interactions I've ever had. He was so incredibly generous, and I didn't ask him to do it. I was just happy to have him sign that booklet. And what made it even better, I don't know how well you guys could have seen it. He actually had to switch to another marker. Like he signed the booklet with a silver, so that it would actually show up. And then he, without even looking up, he just reaches up, grabs the box, gets out the black marker, and signs that. I'm like,
okay. Yeah. If it makes you feel better, those Sharpies are pretty. He signed my Criterion as well, and I just keep mine on my shelf all normal like. It's been there for oh my God, 12 years. And it's still in good shape. So yours will probably last a long time. And then he signed the booklet of my Criterion, my classic media in 2010. Mm-hmm. And that one absolutely stays inside the package. Let me breathe on that one. Dear God, no.
That's why I had him sign a Laserdisc copy. That thing never comes out because I do have a Laserdisc player, but I'm not going to watch the Laserdisc. There you go. Yeah.
Yep. I got my pile.
That was like one of the Paramount VHS collections.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have the Paramount VHS too, but I grabbed this one just because I didn't know if I'd have a chance to show it off or not. But I love the art.
Laserdiscs are wild.
I love the depiction of Raymond Burr. I don't know what Kenji Sahara and his girlfriend from Rodan are doing on the cover, but here they are.
Was Rodan included?
Yeah, I wish. I do have the Rodan Laserdisc as well. But and again, if you look, that's the 1985 Godzilla. It's not showing up well, but that's definitely him.
Hey! I have the Sea Monster VHS that has 90s Heisei Godzilla.
The Heisei Godzilla, yeah. Unusual
Laserdisc for you.
Oh, the Japanese
lordy!
One. God, that's gorgeous.
Wow,
I don't have that one.
That was so amazing.
Just very simplistic.
It's beautiful.
Mostly black. This is Godzilla's Black album. Like it's Black album.
That's great.
Godzilla does a cover of Enter Sandman. I would totally listen to that.
That's a work of art. That is a work of art. Wow, that's gorgeous.
Yeah, the Japanese laser discs always pay off really well. It's not to say that some of the American laser discs and even the American releases of these Toho films aren't great in themselves, but I still am a big fan. They try to make something extra special. The Destroya one is where it has, I think it's on the rear of it, says Godzilla dies. Hello, spoilers.
Yeah, well, that was the tagline for the movie. I gotta tell you though, I always remembered hearing about Laserdisc growing up, but I never saw one in the wild.
Wow.
Yeah, they're rare. They're rare. There's a lot of Laserdisc movies and not a lot of working players.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's still something about finding the Japanese releases. So Takarada and
God, look at that.
Mr. Nakajima.
Wow.
Oh, right, don't make me jealous.
That is gorgeous.
Yeah, it is.
Wow.
Godzilla versus Mothra, which also has the American release on it, even though this is a Japanese Laserdisc. It does come with.
I wonder if it's because the American version has exclusive footage.
Yes, yeah, likely it is. It's
which
it's even got the poster art.
I know this is a tangent, but it's kind of annoying. Oh wow!
Oh my God.
But as I was saying, it's kind of annoying that version of the movie is almost lost media because the only way to see it now is to get the classic media discs or the old VHSs.
Yeah.
That's why you don't get rid of that stuff, people. Keep it.
That's right.
Hashtag physical media forever.
Keep it safe. Keep it. I literally the other day got Mothra versus Godzilla. I know we're off topic. Mothra versus Godzilla turned 60 years old the other day. And I put in, I did not put in the Japanese version. I put in Versus the Thing because that's the one I grew up with. And I put the classic media disc in. That's my go-to version of it. I mean, clearly that's the only disc I have that has that version other than the original classic media. And I think I have maybe three. I think it was maybe re-released on DVD 3-4 times. Classic media did it twice.
Oh yeah, the yellow version, the actual good version.
Yeah, it's the one that's in this set, the box set.
Yeah, I did love both cuts of those films, because I've always loved compare it to the original and the U.S. cut. Compared the two, like because of their time limits on those films.
They're worth comparing. They're fascinating to compare to each other. And that's kind of one of the interesting things about the US version when you're that's very singular to this film, because there are no other, in terms of like wide availability, because unfortunately 85 would qualify, but you can't get it legally anymore unless you go hunt down a tape or, you know, some kind of weird black market thing.
I was going to say, that's why I'm secretly hoping Criterion flexes their muscles hard.
I hope. And then King Kong versus Godzilla, again, weird because it's flip-flopped, and the English version's the only one they'll let over here, and you got to look at the bonus feature list to find the Japanese cut. But King of the Monsters is a unique case because it's undergone this very fascinating journey, because for years, from 56 up until really only maybe 20 plus years ago, it was the de facto version of this film in the United States.
Yeah, I think it was 2004.
2004.
Yeah,
2004. There was a kind of a traveling showings of it in the U.S.
Because I gotta say, they never show Ishiro Honda's original cut until 2004 in U.S. theaters for a limited time.
That's right, and that's when it became available widely for the first time. That's when this release came out, and that's when the reappraisals began, because you can't reappraise something on a wide scale if it's not accessible on a wide scale. So almost overnight, the 56 King of the Monsters version went from being the de facto version that everybody in the United States, that's all they had, to now you have both, and they're presented like classic media. Those two films are presented equally here. They each get their own disc. They each get their own audio commentary. They each get their own, like, all that stuff. So it's very much like this set is definitely leaning into the original, but it's celebrating both. So they went from just one to equals, and nowadays the 56 version is a bonus feature in and of itself. It went
because the progression, because Criterion was the second one to release the movies. Because what was weird is that Classic Media did make a Blu-ray after they had released all of the DVDs of the package that they had, but it was only the original and there were no special features, so it was a really lame release.
Yeah, I never picked that one up. I never picked that one up.
You're saying Classic Media presented them basically equally, but then you fast forward a handful of years and Criterion releases it, and they're leaning hard into the Japanese version, and they do include the 56 version, and they do so respectfully, but it's relegated to a special feature.
Yeah. So it went from basically the two switched places, like so, right? You have essential, and the only thing available to what is like now it's getting dangerously close to becoming footnote territory, and I'd hate to see that happen, because. And I'd really hate for the American version to eventually be written off as, unnecessary and antiquated, because it is a wonderful version of the film on its own. It's wonderful to compare the two cuts. It has a lot of strengths. Al C. Ward's script for that film, I will swear up and down that it's one of the best 50 sci-fi movies in terms of scripting. It is wonderfully written. I quoted it at the beginning. You have great lines. You have your fear, which might become reality. Yeah. Godzilla, which is real. Which I think is the greatest contribution that version has, because I do think that when you compare that to the original Japanese line, that one is actually better. Yeah, it is a wonderfully written film. It's about as well put together in terms of adding the new scenes and getting people to play the backs of other characters' heads as you possibly can. And Raymond Burr's great in it. And
it was actually very respectful.
They treated it.
I have to say, you could make the argument that it kind of neuters certain aspects of it, but I still think it was done very respectfully. The fact that they even dubbed it was an honor, because it was more expensive dubbing gets such a bad reputation, but especially in the 50s, it was more expensive to dub something.
Yeah. And
to just subtitle it.
Yeah. And I gotta say, I mean, back then, I mean, people from the 50s and 60s or 40s back then don't like watching movies with subtitles. And
not many. the Kurosawa movies were being brought over with subtitles, but they
weren't mass market films.
They weren't mass market films. Those were the ones for the film snobs, because it was supposed to be these are artsy movies, and the guys who distributed Godzilla wanted to present it as a commercial film.
Yeah,
and a worldwide success, which is why they renamed him Gojira to Godzilla, which, if you see the commentary tracks, I mean, there's amazing commentary tracks on both the classic media and the Criterion.
Yeah.
At least
David Khaled is the man.
Yes, he is. And I still love Steve Reifel and Ed Godziszewski on the classic media. I mean, we get the best of all worlds from the Godzilla gurus, the very academic Godzilla guys who do not talk down to you. They present it with a lot of love and affection. David Khaled's
and the cool thing was Khaled did commentaries for both versions.
Yes, yeah, all on his own. And but yeah, his speaking about Terry Morse and how bringing it over to the United States the way he did, and the love and affection they had for it, and the attention to detail they had for it, to fool the audience in thinking that Raymond Burr actually went over there to Japan to shoot these scenes. It fooled me as a kid. I thought he went over there.
Yeah.
But it's when you watch it and you see some of those things that they can point out now. But even a clock on the wall or a map on the wall, they tried to make sure that was matching as well as possible. Some of the Japanese extras, especially the one who plays Yamane, who looks at Raymond Burr's chest. Raymond Burr's a very tall man, crazy tall man, so he towers over most of the Japanese counterparts.
I gotta say, I mean, when they made, when they redubbed this film in 1956, I mean, when it was owned by a company who owned and now bought the rights to this film to do a dub version of it. I mean, they agreed they just have to rearrange some scenes, and they actually cut out some of the about the nuclear bomb tests.
It's not so much that they cut that, because that's still in there. The anti-nuclear sentiment is still in the 56 version. It's just that some of the more specifically Japanese attitudes toward it are not in the movie. Like, there's a scene in the subway where one of the passengers mentions offhand, "Oh, it's happening again. Oh, I survived Nagasaki for this." It's things like that were removed, but the actual nuclear aspects of all of it are still there. The 56 version is a fascinating window into a moment in time, I would say. That was at a point when something like that, if you were going to make it a commercial success to a mass audience, that soon after World War II, it would have been a difficult sell to a mass audience. So that's why they recut it with American actors, and they did so respectfully. And honestly, if you listen, as Elijah Thomas of Kaiju Conversation pointed out in the episode he and I did, podcast episode we did on it, if not for the 56 version, we may not have the Godzilla franchise as we understand it now, because it helped make Godzilla into an international phenomenon. And because of that, we got all of the 60s sequels, and we got Americans getting involved in the productions of some of those movies in the 60s. It's this massive domino effect that you could potentially trace back to that version. So yeah, I think it should be preserved. I don't think it should be relegated to a special feature. It should be treated respectfully, even if the moment that it was necessary has long since passed.
That's very interesting. And I say, I like both cuts of this film. I mean, I'm more into the Raymond Burr version. I mean, and I know that this was, I think this this was actually Raymond Burr's first film that he ever featured to be a good guy in this.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say it wasn't his first movie.
No.
He was in Rear Window with Hitchcock, and that's an amazing movie.
I meant this is the first film he ever.
Yeah, he was
a good guy
because he was the villain in Rear Window.
He was a heavy in a lot of movies. One of my favorite roles. Nobody ever really talks about this one, but if you're into classic comedy, you might remember "You're Never Too Young" with Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis from the early '50s, where he plays the bad guy diamond thief guy who's chasing after Jerry Lewis. That's the first time I ever saw him in a movie. I saw him in that before I saw Rear Window or Perry Mason or anything like that.
Yeah.
Or King of the Monsters. As far as I know, I think I saw that before King of the Monsters. I was really young when I saw that. But yeah, he was traditionally he was a big dude. He was a tall dude. And he just had broad shoulders, big presence. He's the kind of guy you could put him in a suit and give him a pipe, and he has an intimidating, kind of countenance to him a little bit. Apparently he was an absolute teddy bear in real life, but
yeah. And he's actually, I've heard that he's actually said that it was being in this movie that he thinks paved the way for him to get Perry Mason, which catapulted him to superstardom. So he was always proud of his involvement with the Godzilla franchise. In fact, it's because he just put his foot down that Godzilla 85 actually came out respectful and not some bizarre comedy, which is what Roger Corman and New World Pictures want to do. They wanted to make it was like they were just going to basically do like a joke dub of it, with new scenes. It would have been like, "What's up, Tiger Lily?"
They were going to Woody Allen it, yeah.
Yeah, they were going to Woody Allen it, and he's like, "I'm not going to be involved if you're going to do that. You got it. So we're going to do this respectfully." Okay. So most of the stupid jokes got removed.
It's like you can have Dr. Pepper, you can have me and Dr. Pepper, but you won't have both of us if you decide to make this a farce.
Yeah, basically. Now that some of the dumb jokes are still in there, like, "Oh, such a great urban renewal plan." Shut up, sir.
And Nathan, I'm gonna have to stop you right there. I want to have a few things to say. And sorry about from you and yeah, I mean, and I know I would like to talk about some scenes they rearranged of both cuts. I mean, I know the openings of both of these cuts. I mean, I know the original had the Toho logo with Godzilla's footsteps and stomping, and then the title and the original Japanese title just popped up. I mean, slide up, and then he just shows Godzilla's war, and then it plays Godzilla's theme, and then after that, they show some group of people on a boat that was actually based off the Lucky Dragon number 5 incident. I mean, and then, but in the US cut, I mean, they did show the Toho logo, but they didn't have Godzilla's footsteps yet. They just showed like a planet Earth called Translation World. Wasn't that called?
Would have been, oh my goodness, Transworld Films. My brain might not be.
And I just noticed something about that. That's the planet Earth with the word says they translated world. I mean, that I think they actually pasted the planet Earth on the actual Toho logo, and then they just cover the Toho name underneath, where it's just fade the blacks on the Toho name.
I will need to watch it again, but
that was
confident that was the logo.
Yeah, well, that was only in the US cut opening, and then it just shows the ocean and shows the light, and it shows the title Godzilla King of the Monsters, and then they just show the Tokyo's been destroyed right from the original Japanese of right in the middle of after Godzilla's destruction, but Raymond Burris, the narrator, is saying this is Tokyo.
Yeah. The 56 version is structured a little bit more like a film noir.
Yeah, and and the US cut was just more of Raymond Burris is just telling a little flashback. Narrator.
Yeah, like
and his character was named Steve Martin.
20 years before the other Steve
The
Martin.
wild and crazy guy.
A wild and crazy guy. Yeah, which is why in Godzilla in 1985, he's never referred to by his full name. It's either just Steve or Mr. Martin.
Yeah, it's just because in the 85 one, they just call him Mr. Martin.
Well, and it's just such an American simplistic name. It's just like Joe Smith or something. It's not anything other than an easy name for everyone to remember. So I still think that maybe the comedian Steve Martin should have gone with a middle initial or something, Steve M. Martin or something, because we can't take the name of Raymond Burr's character from Godzilla. But I was going to mention that, and real quick, I'll get you, Nate. It was just that I do love the frame narrative. It starts with Steve Martin in the rubble. That is a non-linear way of telling the story. Started at the end of the story, flashback, and then catch up to where you are to do the epilogue and then the conclusion of the story. So I always thought that was a interesting way and a very American kind of way of doing things versus trying to do exactly, everything in a linear storyline. But the fact that the Japanese version takes itself so very seriously, having the title credits and that opening scene in the, with the fishing boat, this is like, and I've said this before, this is like a 9/11 movie coming out 6 months after 9/11. I mean, that's the wound is still a little too open. And, the Lucky Dragon incident had happened 6 months, literally, before this film had come out. And here it is, opening with a fishing boat incident and a giant flash of lights, and the radio operator dies and is the first victim, and in the Lucky Dragon, the only victim of that. But it's like that is hits so close to home that it's very risky and daring, and they took the risk, they rolled the dice, and it paid off. Sorry, Nate, I know you probably had something on.
Well, no, I was just thinking back to, going back to the Steve Martin thing. I remember seeing somebody joke on the artist formerly known as Twitter. You're welcome, Danny. where he said, like, if the Monsterverse really wants to get funny, they need to have the actor Steve Martin make a cameo in a movie playing somebody named Raymond.
Even better.
Well, I'll tell you what.
That was a good one.
The Godzilla Kong the Hunted comic, the lead character is named Raymond Martin.
I know, it's a little confusing.
Yeah, it's like because
it's like somebody was listening to my show. I'm just saying.
Yeah, they made the joke. They went there. That's like naming a character Miki Sarazawa. It's not like because get it.
Well, and it's such a missed opportunity in the Monsterverse. They had to use Sarazawa because of just the
name recognition.
The wrong name to use though. He was not the one-to-one Sarazawa here.
No,
he was not.
Yeah. No, but he is a double reference because when you find out what his full name, it's Ashiro Sarazawa.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. And in the U.S. cut that Steve Martin is Raymond Burr, they said he was an old college friend of Dr. Sarazawa. I was laugh at this. I mean, after I watched the original Japanese cut, I rewatched the U.S. cut again, and then I thought it was like so funny. It's so weird. I mean, how did they become college buddy? Because Dr. Sarazawa is Japanese and Raymond is American.
It's still possible because Dr. Sarazawa probably would have had to go to a prestigious university to get, for the kind of work that he does, which means he might have gone to America to do that. That wouldn't have been unheard of. Yeah.
And I want to talk about this. I mean, I noticed in some scenes in the US cut when Raymond Burr is Steve Martin, whatever you want to call it, is in the hospital, and then he was wearing all bandages, and then Emiko shows up, and they only show her with Steve Martin, but only shows the back of her. It's just they didn't show her face because that's not the actual actress.
No.
And same thing with Dr. Dr. Sarasawa when he was on the phone with Martin, and they should cover his face with all the scientist glass. And
and to be honest, until I actually read about how they would do that to hide things, I don't think I ever thought about it.
Yeah,
it just worked. And am I the one weirdo in this call who actually considers the weirdo among the weirdos? Am I the weirdo among the weirdos who actually considers both versions of the movie canon?
There are subtle reasons why it can't be, but I'm not going to be a buzzkill. Like
I was just gonna say, I like to think of the 56 version as like a side story.
Like there's really
the same event. What
hanging around in the 54 cut somewhere just out of frame you can't see.
Yeah, that's how I like to picture. I know that there are some subtle continuity differences. It doesn't bother me all that much because I still think it can feasibly work.
It could. The only really big one, there are a couple small ones, but the big one is the revelation of the oxygen destroyer. As presented in King of the Monsters, Emiko breaks the news to Ogata and Mr. Martin at the same time. And it's in a completely different location. So unless Ogata like hit his head and forgot or something, or he was like playing dumb.
I guess in my mind it was because I don't remember Ogata reacting all that much to it. So my thought process was that they were just telling Steve Ogata already knew, which we saw in we see in the Japanese version.
That almost works, but Ogata does have a line about what did Sarazawa tell you that day or something like that. We didn't know. Yeah. If you take that one line out, you can make the argument that the movies are happening at the same. Yeah. It's that one line. I've thought about it. Trust me.
But then Steve Martin does actually progresses the plot forward in any way or holds it back because he's peripheral to it. He's not he's not with the plot in the sense he's just along for the ride. So he doesn't convince Emiko necessarily to go after Sarazawa to get him to give up the technology and use it against Godzilla. Essentially, Emmy, makes that decision with all the advice from Ogata and and in that case, Steve Martin, if you want to call it canon. But she knows this is the right thing to do, even though it's a difficult decision for her to make. Mm-hmm. But there's something about Steve Martin's presence there that you could take or leave. And you could say he was there in the peripheral and now he's never going back to Japan ever again.
Dear God, no. Staying away from that place, man. That's too crazy for me.
Well, and what's kind of funny is in one of his scenes, he when he's talking to Emiko, he's like, it was Tokyo last night, but it could be another city tomorrow. It could be Osaka. Oh, wait. That did happen.
Yeah.
Steve Martin was right, dang it.
Steve Martin was right. And I find it.
Oh, yeah. When he was.
Raids again.
Yeah. And
what tickles me about Raids Again is that in this film, they made, we talked about it before, they made Raymond Burr and Dr. Sarazawa college buddies, and then when they dubbed Godzilla Raids Again into its Gigantus version, they took the two of the characters, because we have Yoshio Tsuchiya, who comes in toward the end of the film as the friend of our lead Tsukioka, and in the Japanese version they are college friends, and in the dub they're old war buddies. So
wow,
they switched it. So I don't know. I find that funny, that any kind of implication that, because there's all kinds of interesting stuff in both versions of the original 54 film that argue Sarazawa has like deep, dark World War II secrets. And so the implication being that maybe the oxygen destroyer was like a, last ditch World War II thing that went wrong and he's been sitting on it, which is not the case.
Well, he was inspired by Oppenheimer.
Well, I mean, that's yes. Very, very, very true. Very,
and
very true.
I'm gonna stop you right there, Daniel. I mean, I do have a few things to say. I mean, like, I want to talk about the the history of how did Godzilla began. Is because I like
How
I
long
said
you
I
got?
like I did my best doing research about how before this film was made, and because it all started because during World War II. I mean, because of all how this movie was made, because a few years before, because there during World War II there are lots of H bombs or there's some other words of another
Fire
bomb.
bombings.
Yeah, lots of fire bombings, and especially the H bomb of the nuclear bomb or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
That was actually inspired by it, because that was during World War II, because of the Americans hit the bombs in Japan, and I heard back then when people got sick from radiation poisoning because of the bombs.
Yeah, that actually, if I remember right, I think that actually killed more people than the actual detonation.
Yeah, because they
at least in the long run, I think it did.
Yeah, because of radiation poisoning.
Yeah, and a lot of other things, cancer, and just it was horrendous.
And Toho was gonna make a film that we were making during World War II, but sadly it got canceled because of the war. I forgot what it's called.
No, are you talking about the movie that they were trying to make when that got canceled, and then Tanaka said, "Well, we'll make a monster movie."
I think that's what I was talking about.
Yeah, that was
Beyond the Glory.
Yeah, Beyond the Glory. That's what it was. Yeah, what was that even supposed to be about? I think it was a drama.
It was it was a drama. It was supposed to be shot in and set in Indonesia.
That's right. I knew Indonesia was in there. I was just trying to remember exactly what it is, but it fell through.
Yeah.
But Tanaka's like, well, we got to make something.
Yeah.
And then he was like, oh, Beast from 20,000 Fathoms. Let's do that.
Yeah, I was going to say that Godzilla was actually a ripoff and based off of the Beast from 20,000 Fathoms.
It was inspired by by Beast from 20,000 Fathoms.
Yeah, ripoff is
still at my Beast.
Yeah, and be honest, I've never seen the Beast from 20,000.
Oh, you should, dude. You should.
Yeah, I gotta rent it.
You totally should. It was Harryhausen's first credited movie. The special effects are great, and there are going to be points where you're watching it, we're going to be like, "Holy crap!" They got Toho took this. Like, there's a whole sequence in the middle of the movie where they go diving in. It was in a submarine, not in diving gear, to go look for the monster, and you're gonna be like, oh my gosh, it's the oxygen destroyer scene. There's so much was taken.
Yeah, I was gonna say
it's a fantastic movie.
Yeah,
I can't say that.
This movie, I gotta say that movie kind of sounds familiar of the original Godzilla, but before that, because
it was 1953.
Yeah, I was gonna say that. I think when Ray Harryhausen, the guy who created the Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, I mean, when he heard that Godzilla was released in theaters, I think he was amazed that.
No, he hated it.
He hated Godzilla.
He had no reason to hate Godzilla. They were not, they were not using the same special effects because they just did not have the time, effort.
Eiji Tsuburaya wanted to do Eiji Tsuburaya wanted to do stop motion, but he said it would take 7 years to make.
Yeah. And I want to say that that name escapes me. Like, what you just said, his name,
Tsuburaya.
Agent Tsuburaya, like the special effects director. I mean, he does special effects on every Godzilla film, and I think
for the up until about the mid 50s, and then his involvement was less so for the second half of the 60s, and then he died in 1970.
Yeah, and I can say the reason he became a special effects director because he watched Mercy Cooper's King Kong film, And
King Kong had been re-released in Japan was it 53?
And it was re-released in America
in 53,
in a couple of in other countries in 52.
52. That's what because I knew
yeah.
the re-release of King Kong was also a factor in getting the original Godzilla made.
The 52 re-release of King Kong earned more than the 33 initial release did.
Yeah.
And it was that film's success that ultimately inspired Beast to go into production. The whole Godzilla taking from Beast thing has been really blown up over time. The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms had not even released in Japan when Godzilla was pitched. Tomoyuki Tanaka hadn't seen Beast when Godzilla was made. But he was aware that an atomic monster movie with a dinosaur in it had done well in the United States. He had not seen it, so a lot of the visual similarities and plot similarities are more coincidental than theft. So that's kind of a lot of people will say, well, one's a ripoff of the other, but
I don't consider it a ripoff. I think
ripoff
far too strong of a word.
No, and it's definitely an interesting progenitor, and it's the moment where because. You also have to remember the Beast from 20,000 Fathoms was the genesis of the atomic monster genre as a whole. And at that point, the genre almost immediately splinters into the Western half, which, less than a year later gave us Them and all the giant bugs and all that stuff. And then the Japanese half starts developing into Kaiju Eiga, which is its own unique brand of 50s monster that then became its own brand of Japanese monster.
Yeah. Which, by the way, people listening or watching to this, Them with the giant ants, also fantastic, and you should watch it.
Yes, the giant ants.
Well, and you mentioned Tanaka coming up with the idea on his way back from Indonesia. I need to come up with a film of some sorts, and I'm coming back empty-handed. Basically, going to go to Toho, and I've got to pitch something. And I think it was the flight back where he looked out the window and says, what would it be like if I had a giant sea monster, come out of the ocean? At that point,
wasn't there also a story about seeing a cloud?
Yeah, that almost sounds similar, but before the cloud, it was like it was another. Yeah, that was the other guy who created Gamera.
Oh, okay, that might be what I'm thinking of.
And there's no concrete evidence that either of those stories are real. Because the Tanaka looking into the water and thinking, "Ooh, dinosaur," may have happened. I don't really see why he would have lied about that, but we have no real proof. Same as there's no proof that there was ever a guy on the Toho lot with the nickname GODZILLA.
Oh yeah, because he was a husky fella.
Yeah. Now that guy was. Some people will claim that guy has been identified, but there's no proof. There's no concrete evidence.
And I want to talk about how the guy who designed Godzilla. I mean, they come up with many ideas for the design of the King of the Monsters.
At one point, he was an octopus.
I was gonna say they did use an octopus idea, but it was scrapped.
Can you imagine if they stuck with the octopus idea? Would we have still gotten everything else?
It would just look ridiculous.
Oh my gosh! Godzilla the octopus versus Megalon. I mean,
oh my god, they should call it Octopuzilla.
You know what? I would almost pay somebody to do 5-minute remakes of every Godzilla movie where he's still an octopus.
Or do a fan drawing.
Everything else the same.
Or do a fan drawing of it.
Well, there you go. Idea. That's what you do. That's what
we know somebody who can do that.
I was going to say, Brendan. That's what you do. There's your next art project.
Make it look like the 54 poster.
Yeah, do fan art of all the other Godzilla posters, but make Godzilla an octopus.
And I heard one of the original design ideas for Godzilla. Way after the original Godzilla was made. I mean, I know in the All Monsters Attack film, that the creature Gabra was supposed to be like the original Godzilla design idea, but I think I did some research and
I've never heard that.
I think they almost made Godzilla's head into like a mushroom head.
Well, he still kind of looks like it's shaped like a mushroom cloud.
Yeah. And I think some of that, the even dorsal fins being, mutation, the idea that it's almost unnatural. Why would he have the dorsal fins like a stegosaurus? There's no reason for an upright dinosaur to have dorsal fins like that. But, I'm going back to the idea that Godzilla could be a squid. He could be a giant dinosaur. He could be whatever. This is the thinking of an executive producer who needs to pitch an idea. He's like, come on, baby, come up with some ideas. I just want a giant monster. I don't care what he looks like. Godzilla squid. Okay, make it. And then
Godzilla!
But then when they finally did, and if you remember the story of the suit that ultimately was designed that looked great, but it was so heavy, so monstrously solid that, and I'm not sure if it was, sorry, I'm blanking. Nakajima.
Yeah, he was the original Godzilla suit actor.
But I don't know if he's the one who tried the suit on and fell over.
No, there was another guy. There was another guy, and then they said, "Well, okay, you Nakajima, you come try it," and he actually was able to carry the thing. So that's why, technically, there were two of them, but I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Dan. I think either there's no footage of the other guy, even though he filmed at least a couple of shots, or there's very little of him in there. It's the vast majority is Nakajima.
99.9% is Nakajima. The other gentleman was Katsumi Tezuka, who was not elderly, but older senior stuntman on campus at Toho. And he was a big dude too. And they felt like he would be the one to tackle this. But unfortunately, according to Nakajima, this story changed a little bit over the years as he got a little older, and so the details are a little fuzzy. But according to most versions, Tezuka-san put the suit on and was shooting the destruction of the Diet building, and got a few steps in on the second suit that they built, the more flexible one, which was still so solid that it could stand without a person in it. Because the first one was completely immobile. It was a brick. They used a potent mixture of bad latex and reclaimed tire rubber to make that suit. And the bad rubber, foam latex rubber, was a commodity in post-war Japan, even 9 years later. And anyway, they put Tezuka-san in this thing. He got a couple of steps into knocking over the miniature, took a tumble, injured himself horribly. And they said, Nakajima, come here. And they threw him in, and he shot the other 99.9%. And again, there's no real complete evidence. There might be a few shots, at least of the Diet destruction, that are of Tezuka-san's performance. But from this point on, it was Nakajima. And he's the one. He's the one.
Now, they did try to give him a little bit of relief because they had a half suit for some shot.
They cut the first suit in half.
And I'm sorry for me, you guys. I gotta say that Haru Nakajima, I just love he is the original Godzilla, and I never got the chance to meet him in person and take a picture with him before he passed away. And one of my great regrets is I had an opportunity and I didn't take it. Yeah, and I heard that they actually made him wear the suit for only 3 minutes. I mean, the reason why is because the suit of it itself was so heavy, and the inside it was so hot inside, and Nakajima just wears the suit and he passed out so easily when they were filming it. Yeah, I believe it weighed 220 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
It was. Is that really that heavy?
It was that heavy. If I remember correctly, I think the lightest Godzilla suit, last I heard, I think was actually the Megalon suit. That one was still 80 pounds.
Wow.
This original suit was no joke. It was a 220-pound baking hot death trap that if Haruo Nakajima wasn't a badass, it would have killed him. It would have killed him. It would have killed most people. He could last about 3 minutes, sometimes as little as 2, before the exhaustion of carrying all the weight and the hot, remember, because you've also got hot studio lights, and the lighting is very important on a miniature tokusatsu set because it has to look real. And it's also different because you have to shoot things with specific lighting in black and white. So it was incredibly hot. This thing was incredibly thick. You can only see out of like a couple of pinholes in the neck. And so he couldn't see. It was so rigid that he couldn't really turn the neck. Most of the articulation you see in the film comes from a separate hand puppet. And he would pass out, and then at the end of every day, infamously, this is a famous statistic from the film, about a cup plus of sweat would be drained out of the bottom of each of the suit after every day. They lined the inside of this thing with a bamboo structure, wire and bamboo. So just imagine that poking through the rubber and cutting you up while you're trying to walk in it.
Yeah, that happened to Satsuma in the 80s. Yeah, but it wasn't bamboo; it was wire.
Yeah, they stopped using bamboo pretty quick because obvious reasons.
I can say I wonder, and I've always wondered and dreamed what was like to be in those suits.
It's not fun. It is not fun. Like anybody, like that's the thing. I do think most kaiju fans have kind of fantasized a little bit. I was like, oh man, being a suit actor, that would be kind of fun. No, it's not fun.
Yeah, it's like
the only time
it's like you're being cooked inside the suit.
Yeah, the not Satsuma, Nakajima actually said that as much as he loved being Godzilla, his favorite time as a suit actor was actually on War of the Gargantuas, because one, the suit was really light by comparison. It was maybe, I don't know, like 20 pounds or something. It was pretty light because he was playing a humanoid creature and he needed to be able to move around a lot because there was very intense, very physical fighting in it. And also because you could see his actual eyes on the suit, because so he was giving for him, it was like giving a fuller performance.
And I hear that Nakajima, I heard that he actually lost 20 pounds after wearing the suit a few times.
Yeah, it was an intense shoot. When you lose a cup of sweat every day, the full film took about 3 months to fully shoot, and that includes everything, not just the tokusatsu stuff. But if you're losing a pound of water weight a day, and you're also like working your muscles that much, like I said, if his body was in any less shape than it was, or any more in either direction in terms of his muscle mass, his body fat, anything like that, his endurance, it could have killed him. This could have killed him. August Ragone said it best in the Men in Suits documentary, that the men who played Godzilla, quote, endured the agonies of hell to do so, which is a great quote, and it's completely true, because these guys put their lives on the line for their craft. Something like this had never been done on this scale. There'd been a couple of Men in Suit films before this, as far back as the 30s, but nothing like this before. And so it could have killed him. It could have killed him. But not only did he survive, he did it for 12 years.
I know this. And next time, be careful with the party mouth. I mean,
whoops.
Oh, that's okay. And
I did see him flinch a little bit when you said it.
Yeah, I was like, what was I going to say?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I mean, I know the original Godzilla suit. I mean, it was so heavy. I mean, I don't know if that suit still exists. I mean,
it doesn't. No. It's there's only, as far as I know, there's only one original Showa monsters, a Godzilla suit anyway, that's been preserved, and it's technically a cobbled together version. It's Mecha Godzilla from the 70s, but because there is a Mecha Godzilla suit on display in a museum, if I remember correctly, but it's a combination of like the body of the 74 and the head of the 75, or vice versa, something like that. So it's cobbled together, but still that's been preserved because it doesn't have nearly as much rubber. Rubber doesn't last long.
Yeah, and then and then Haruo Nakajima, he did play Godzilla again in Godzilla Raise Again, and this time this Godzilla suit in Raise Again, they actually made the suit lighter.
It was lighter, yeah,
yeah,
because he had to fight in it.
Yeah, and it makes it easier for Nakajima to move around fast.
Yep, and then he kept coming back for 12 more movies in 18 years. It's crazy.
And not just as Godzilla, but as Rodan, as Varan, as King Kong, as
yes. And the wild thing is, he was also in Ultraman. He played several monsters in Ultraman. Right. I heard a funny story about how he gave Ben Faruya a really hard time on Ultraman.
Whoa.
Yeah, he gave him such a hard time because he was always he was always playing the bad guys, and he would give Ben Faruya a hard time. It's like, oh, so you get to kill me today, or something like that. But so he made a whole career out of this. It's wild.
I love picking him out of other films where he's got non-speaking.
Yeah, where he makes an on-screen cameo in this movie actually as an extra. But here's the thought I was trying to get at.
I think he made another cameo in Godzilla vs. Gigan. Is it?
Yeah, he generally would make face cameos in the movies that he was in. But one of the things I wanted to bring up, because he's so awesome, this guy is so BA. He only ever got in, despite all of the stuff he endured, he only ever got injured on set once, and it was on Varan, because they decided in their infinite wisdom to blow up a model truck right under him.
And he just kept going.
But after they realized, like, oh, you're actually hurt, he's like, yeah, I am. It's like, okay, you're taking the day off. All right.
Did you get the shot? More concerned about the craft. It's like, blow me up, whatever you have to do, just get the shot right the first time. But yeah, and the man went through so much. He perfected the craft. And you think about one of these other kinds of ideas behind holding your arms up here, not just where we would hold them when we're trying to pose as Godzilla, where we hold them sort of at chest level, but since his head is in the neck.
Yeah, that's the chest level thing. That's more of a Satsuma pose.
Yeah. And I want to get back to the design of Godzilla, how they come up with it. I mean, they used the design idea to have Godzilla to have a cross between a T-Rex and a Stegosaurus, but also an iguanodon.
Really? I don't remember the iguanodon story.
They use the iguana. They use a cross between a T-Rex, Stegosaurus, and iguanodon because, the iguanodon has his thumbs sticking up, and look at Godzilla's. They do look like iguanodon hands.
Huh. Danny, can you confirm the iguanodon story?
100%. Yeah.
Really?
They used a couple of magazines, English magazines, including the Life magazine of the Rudolph Salinger.
Is it the same magazines that belong to the White Scientist in King Kong versus Godzilla?
No, he was using children's picture books.
This is true.
Which is a much more reliable source. No, they used a potent mixture of Rudolph Salinger and Charles R. Knight when designing Godzilla. If you look at Salinger's T-Rex, it has a very Godzilla-like head. If you look at Charles Knight's Iguanodon, it is eerily Godzilla-like. And if you combine those two, because around the same time, Life magazine did it's one of the most famous Life magazine covers of all time, the absolutely beautiful Salinger panorama that he did on the wall. I don't remember the name of the museum, but the wall of this museum that just kind of showed prehistoric life, and the T-Rex from that is iconic. If you look that up, you'll recognize it, and that was on the cover of this magazine. And so they used that and a couple of other magazines and some other paleontological stuff, a couple of books, and really kind of came up with this very unique thing. The back plates are very Stegosaur-like, but they're also maple leaves.
I have that figure, and I like that figure that you have, Daniel. And that is actually my very first Godzilla toy I ever bought back in 2004. This the year after I discovered my very first Godzilla film of Toho, the 1985.
This was my first Bandai vinyl. This is the first representation I ever had of the Japanese Godzilla in my collection. Before this, I only ever had 98s.
Yeah, I remember buying that as a kid.
You missed out on the good Trendmasters toys?
Yep, I missed out on Trendmasters. I never found any of them. I didn't know they existed until years later.
Yeah, and I remember I saw this figure at a KB toy store. If you guys remember KB toys,
I absolutely do.
That used to exist, and
wow,
I remember them quite fondly.
I remember when I saw them when I was a kid, I wanted it, and then also along with the Gigan Playmate toy. And those two were actually my first Godzilla toys I ever bought.
I got the Gigan was the first one I got, and then I got the one back and got this one.
And I still have those figures to this day.
I used to bring I'm surprised he's in as good a shape as he's in. I brought him to school with me. I snuck him to baseball games and played with them instead of watching the baseball games. Took him on family campouts. He's in good shape, all things considered, considering how well loved he is.
If that face just says, "I've seen things, man."
Yeah.
That figure you had looks almost cartoonish looking, but the Memorial Box Bandai version, it looks so. They really catch it from the film better.
I was going to say, why does your version have gray chest hair?
You don't want to know. Don't ask questions. You don't want to know the answer.
No, I'm not talking to you, Danny. I'm talking to Brendan.
Oh. Like there's no gray here. He's a strapping.
Wait a minute. What are you talking about? Wait a minute. You talking about this?
Yeah, it was
acceleration.
I don't know. Almost like the shadowy parts.
And he's got white knees. What the heck?
Yeah.
Well, but you've seen the Imperial though, right? With the very splashed up white chest that they put in the middle of that green figure, and then they slap some lipstick on him, and then they sell. There's my KB toy memory, because again,
I miss KB toys
because that was the between that Godzilla and the Imperial Kong, that was our toy store experience with Godzilla figures here in the States, at least in the Midwest. Nothing was getting imported at that time. You weren't getting, I guess there was probably, if you really looked, you could probably find those Aurora model kits or something like that.
Yeah, those were the first. It's that Imperial one. It's almost like an official bootleg.
Yeah.
They're great. I mean, if Gen X had an official Godzilla figure, that would be it. If there was a millennial one, it would be Trendmasters.
Yeah.
So every generation, and then the baby boomers would have had the Aurora kit, stuff like that. So every generation has its definitive kind of de facto collectible for that stuff. But I love this guy.
Yeah. There are days where I wish some toy company would just be like, hey, does anybody have those Trendmasters molds on file someplace? We could reissue these and make a bunch of money.
No, they just do variants like Mondo does of the Trendmasters variants. Of
Super 7. Super 7 has been doing Shogun Warriors. They've been doing they make it in Marasans. I mean, make it happen.
Yeah. And have some Marasan Super 7.
I'm just saying, guys, you are sitting on a pile of money if you start remolding and reissuing these even just the main line of these Trendmasters toys. They would get so much money.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and so let's get back to the film. So I want to talk about the cast in the original Japanese cut and some scenes. I mean, the one thing I left out when Haruo Nakajima was wearing the Godzilla suit, when he was wearing it, when they were filming, when he was destroying buildings. I mean, they actually had to be careful. They had to film the shot when Nakajima was destroying the buildings in the right way, because if he does it the wrong way, they don't have time to rebuild the buildings, and they don't have enough money.
It would take a while to set the shot back up.
Yeah. And I want to talk about the Odo Island.
Okay.
It's I know this kind of like -1, but that was way, way before -1. I mean, I heard the Islanders on Odo Island, the one guys talk about they thought Godzilla is a legend, a creature, you know, and he always talks about it. I mean, and he was a Japanese cut. I mean, he did mention about feeding his cows. I mean, and then this lady came in and said, "Talk about Godzilla again."
Oh,
but that line was never in the U.S. cut.
No, and at one point they were going when Godzilla's head pokes up from the mountain, he was going to have a cow in his mouth.
Yeah, that was like one of the deleted scenes.
It was one of the deleted scenes, but I don't know exactly why they left it out, but even though it had kind of been set up.
Bart Simpson showed up and said, "Don't have a cow," and he listened. To his credit,
thank you. And
I'm not proud of that joke, but I said it anyway. So there you go.
Wow, and, Danny, you're not even a dad and you're cranking these out. I'm just saying.
Wow.
And I want to say that in this film, Godzilla bites stuff in this movie like 3 times. I mean, first he bites he has a cow in his mouth. I mean, which is a deleted scene.
Cut, yeah.
And he had a train in his mouth, and he drops it, and then
starting the tradition of Godzilla hating trains. I don't know what trains did to Godzilla, but he just every time there's a train, he just has to take it out, which is why Shin Godzilla is kind of funny because the trains get their revenge.
Yeah, and Godzilla did bite had a train in his mouth, and he did bite the tower, the radio tower, and then. I mean, I think that was like I don't know if this is like the only film that Godzilla puts stuff in his mouth or bites. I mean, but the rest of
he bit Anguirus's neck.
Yeah, and I think those are only the 2 Shona Godzilla films that have had Godzilla bite stuff.
Well, I was gonna say he bit things in the later series.
Well, Ebera's claw.
He bit Ebera.
Yeah,
he did bite Ebera's
Ebera.
claw.
Yeah, I mean, occasionally.
I keep thinking he bit a train again later. I'm trying to remember. Well, no, I don't think he did.
-1, he bites it.
Well, -1 he did, but I'm thinking in the show. I'm trying to remember. I think I remember if it happened again in the show movie.
He did bite Space Godzilla in the Heisei era.
Yeah, he bit Batra. He bit Space Godzilla.
Yeah.
He bit he bit Ghidorah in GMK.
And he bite Mothra in Tokyo SOS.
He bit Mothra in Tokyo SOS. The legendary Godzilla's bit things a few times.
Well,
like he bit the Muto in the first movie.
He bit the dust once or twice.
Hit the dust. There you go.
Can I have that? Thank you. There it is. Thank you.
There you go. Yeah. And if you kind of look back at the lore of Godzilla, he's never been carnivorous. He does not need to eat meat sustenance. You know, his sustenance is radioactive material.
Yeah.
Though, you know, on the first film they couldn't establish that. It's not like there were nuclear power plants around.
No.
And so, but I'm glad that they nixed.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely has the teeth for it. And if I remember correctly, the Kayama novelization still has the cow scene.
Yes.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, because that was based on an earlier draft of the script.
Yes, Kayama, who we didn't mention before, but the initial plot for this film came from the famous, at the time, Japanese horror and science fiction novelist Shigeru Kayama, and his initial vision for Godzilla was as a creature motivated by food. There it is, right there.
I should order that book for maybe an unboxing video.
You need to own it.
It's definitely worth having.
Essential owner to own for any Godzilla fan who's able to get it should check it out. It's really
the translator is on my list to get a hold of to interview, and I want Danny on. I want Danny on for that one.
Jeffrey's an awesome dude. He, and to kind of cycle back to what we were talking about with Odo Island, Jeffrey just recently did a really outstanding interview with Elijah Thomas, who Nate, you mentioned before, and he dropped something interesting on Odo Island that I'm going to reiterate here. that I thought was fascinating. 100% credit goes to Jeffrey Engel's brain for this, but it blew my mind that typically in American subtitling and stuff, and even in dialogue for dubbing, Odo Island is usually written out as O-D-O, Odo, but it should technically be Oto, O-T-O or O-T-T-O. Yeah. Oto meaning door, or variations on like door or gate in Japanese, which gives a whole new layer to the idea that this is where Godzilla comes into the world. It's the gateway. It's the gateway.
Yeah, and what I heard, I don't know if I'm right or wrong, but I think when they on Odo Island, they say whatever time like fishing was poor or less fish. I mean, the villagers it's because of Godzilla drove the fish away, and then the only way they get fish back is the islanders tie girls on rafts to sacrifice them. I mean,
yeah,
I don't know if I'm right or wrong.
No, that is the legend. Whether or not that legend is actually true is never confirmed or not. So it could be a case of Godzilla may have existed in some form or another even before the exposure to radiation and inspired those legends, or the legends existed before Godzilla became Godzilla and then they were attached to him, but we don't know.
Yeah.
It's interesting to look at how the line between science fiction and fantasy crosses in this film, because Godzilla is at once a creature of myth and faith and also of science gone awry. And if you think about it, it could just be that the natives of this island are associating something that has nothing to do with their mythical creature with this real life science monster, like science driven horror monster that comes out of the ocean. Or it could be that Godzilla's advent is somehow a supernatural event. And if you think about it, how is Godzilla driven away at the end of the film? With the sacrifice.
Right.
Yeah. You never know.
You never know. They never address it.
A mythological Godzilla still needs to be an alternative storyline. We're not to the multiverse idea. We're not at all, as Godzilla fans, confused by the idea of this storyline, this canon of Godzilla versus that canon of Godzilla, this canon of Ghidra versus that one, or this, whether he's a space monster or he's, a mythological Earth defender. So the idea that Godzilla is a mythological punishment from the gods, essentially, monster unleashed upon the world by mythological gods, not God, plural, God, capital G, but
the kami.
Yeah. So the idea that he is from the, one of the 7 layers of hell, essentially, as punishment for our, sins, and a sacrifice has to be made, which I always have, I still have that series to finish, the Deus Ex Godzilla idea. That is it a machine? Is it a, Deus Ex Machina, the machine, the god of the machine that takes him down? Or is it the sacrifice? And in most cases, it still takes that idea of sacrifice to rid either Godzilla from humanity, or Godzilla having to sacrifice himself or his own safety, in some cases, his own health, to defeat his foe. And so, which is what, makes for more interesting storylines. Not that you can't use a Deus Ex Machina. We have this device that just works. Don't explain it, but it just works.
Yeah. Well, and that's that. You don't necessarily have to explain it. It needs to serve its purpose, and you need to introduce it well. But it's interesting to bring up this mythological stuff, because I don't, if I remember correctly, and I'm sure Danny can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think that for Akira Ifukube, the composer, for him personally, he thought Godzilla was the souls of the war dead, which then became the story for Godzilla and GMK.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. It's sort of like that. And
but was that just an Ifukube thing, Danny, or was that like an idea that was floated around and they didn't use it, but Ifukube really liked it, I guess?
That was something that I'm struggling to connect it to Ifukube off the top of my head, but it was something.
For some odd reason, I could have swore that was an Ifukube thing.
It was definitely something floated around. It was something that at least one or two critics at the time, and I think a couple of professors, like people who've weighed in at the time on the metaphor of the film and the deeper meaning of the film. It was something that was floated around, and of course it did become a plot point, almost 50 years later. But yeah, the idea that Godzilla is somehow, if not a vessel, as would be the case with GMK, at least representative in some way of the souls lost. Which is kind of what we get in -1, where he's basically a specter of the war. Mm-hmm.
Not so much an atomic allegory, but the like I said, the specter of the war.
Yeah, and also I forgot I left this out besides the suit design. I mean, I want to talk about the puppet. And wasn't there 2 puppets for it?
There were a handful. There was, at least I believe there were a handful. At least one of which did have a nozzle, so that somebody off camera could essentially just spray mist out of it, and all that good stuff. So the mist itself was a mixture of actual physical spray and cell animation. But yeah, the puppets are great. The first time we see Godzilla's face, not all of him, because we see a little bit of his leg in the storm scene, but when we see his face for the first time, it is not the suit, it is the puppet looking over the hill.
Yeah, because the face of the hand puppet looks so different than the suit.
Mm-hmm.
It does look
and
different,
also I forgot to left out, it's like, how when Godzilla when they show a close-up on Godzilla's feet, they actually cut the suit in half.
Yeah, I mentioned that a little earlier just to make it easier on him.
Yeah,
and you can tell that one in some of the shots. They tried to hide it, but the number of toes are different.
Really?
Yeah. You got to pay attention.
4 or 5.
It was 4 or 3.
4 or 3.
Which is funny because they did officially change it later to 3.
Yeah, it's just less for the suit actor to trip over. If you look at most of all the 60s and 70s suits, they have 3 toes. No thumb toe, no big toe on there.
And then in the Heisei films, they went back to 4.
Yeah, because they were really trying to evoke the 54, which at the time was like, well, he had 4 toes. So they wanted to make that design as close as possible, and that was one reason why they did that. And most Godzilla's scents have maintained that. Baby Godzilla has 3 toes, interestingly enough. And then he got 4th one because because he had a little like vestigial thumb, like a raptor up on his ankle. And then I guess the bigger he got, it just kind of flattened out. I don't know. My monster.
Who cares? All we need to. The only thing that's important with Baby Godzilla is that Kim loves him. That's it.
Oh yeah, Kaiju Kim.
Love that. I love Baby Godzilla. Baby Godzilla's cool. But yeah, they cut the suit in half, and there are a lot of wonderful behind the scenes photos that are constantly shared, and a couple of cool collectibles
where Nakajima has suspenders,
his Godzilla pants.
Yes.
Yep, everybody knows the Godzilla pants.
It's almost like well, I'm sure Danny has, but has everyone here seen the Wrong Trousers, the Wallace and Gromit short? It kind of looks like that, to be honest.
These are the wrong trousers, Gromit.
Gromit.
Yeah.
I'm just
you mentioned that Odo Island storm scene earlier. That is just an amazing scene, by the way, and it doesn't need to show Godzilla barely at all, and you know what's happening, and that's just the fear that comes out in the expressions of the characters on that island. It's what you think you see versus what you actually see.
Yeah.
And the atmosphere.
And it's effective in both versions too.
Yeah, yes. I was just going to get to that.
For different reasons.
Yes.
I want to talk about that. I mean, in the original cut, it actually like it just shows like the native islanders dancing and chanted. I mean, with some music like or that when they're wearing masks with it was those weird masks with long
it's
Tengu. They're Tengu.
Tengu. That's right. I was trying to.
Yeah,
remember.
they're doing an enchanted dance show, and then there's a guy the islander was talking to the guy who was the reporter who was
it was
talking about the legend
reporter.
of Godzilla, and suddenly right in the middle of the enchanted dance, the storm just came, and then while they're doing it, and it just cuts to the house when the kid whose name escapes me, Kenchichi he survived from the destruction of Godzilla after he crushes his house where his family is in. But in the in the US cut, they just showed the enchanted dancing, and then Raymond Burr with the translator. It's all about Godzilla a little bit, and if you listen carefully, you can hear them actually say Godzilla in the English language, saying Godzilla, Godzilla. And
that's exactly what it sounded like too.
Yeah,
that
it did.
Godzilla.
Yeah, they didn't have the best equipment to do the dub in this.
Yeah, and then they just faded the black, and they just showed them in the tent camping, and it was peace and quiet. I mean, they suddenly the storm comes in slow, and you can hear Godzilla's footsteps a little bit. That was actually much better than the original Japanese cut.
I don't know if I would say it's better. I would say they're both effective. The voiceover, what really makes the 56 version work is the voiceover. Again, going back to that sort of noir style, and the lines that Raymond Burr is delivering is talking about like, no one knew if it was just if it was the wind or just the storm or whatever, but the natives, they were certain. They said it was Godzilla.
Yeah, well, and I was saying that, I mean, when Steve Martin and his translator were in the camping out, I mean, when the storm comes in, you hear Godzilla's footsteps a little bit. I mean, it's coming in. That scene makes me think of Jurassic Park.
Oh,
you know that scene when they're in the car in the storm, and then you said
actually, I've never made that connection before. Huh.
Yeah, that scene makes me think of Jurassic Park when.
I do know that Steven Spielberg mentioned Godzilla at least a few times when talking about Jurassic Park, because I've watched a bunch of Jurassic Park documentaries because I did an episode on it, and he did name drop Godzilla a few times.
Yeah.
That's a good connection. That's a really interesting connection to make that.
Yeah.
There are not a lot of Godzilla films that make effective use of just the sound of the feet coming, just the like that terrifying sound of the feet, the footsteps getting closer, which at the time would have been very evocative of the fire bombings. The explosions getting gradually closer and closer.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. I think there was a bit of that in Return of Godzilla.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And I think Godzilla 2014 did a kind of a riff on that a little bit, where it wasn't so much about the sound effects. It was more like you never get a full view of Godzilla throughout the whole thing. And then when you get to the airport scene, the first thing you see, because the camera is at ground level, is you see the feet.
Yeah.
As he comes in, and then we get the slow pan up shot where you finally get to see him.
Yeah, and I love the mountain.
Well, actually, Godzilla 98 did it.
Yes, it did. Yes, it did.
Now they were ripping off Jurassic Park, but they still did it because they're like, making water vibrate. Pshaw, we'll make every car on a city block bounce.
Is that a fact?
And I gotta say, I love the mountain scene when they're going up the mountain after going back to Odo Island, and they found the footsteps, and they finally got to see Godzilla to show what he looks like, and after he appears the mount on the hillside, and then because Emiko fell, and then Godzilla's war, and she screams at him, and then Takarada picks her up, and then they hide, and then Godzilla just disappeared. I mean, But in the US cut, they actually show those scenes of Godzilla twice.
It's a longer sequence. They duplicate a few of the shots, which is because they had to account for extra scenes of Raymond Burr running down the mountain in addition to Emiko and Ogata. So the way that it was, the amount of Godzilla over the hill footage they shot for the 54 cut wouldn't have covered enough. Like they felt like they had to keep cutting back. They also added in extra roars, so it's a longer sequence in general. And the way they cut, it's very effective.
Yeah.
At least they had the courtesy to not try to film new special effects scenes.
No.
Yeah.
No.
And you know what? And I know that Godzilla only weighs like stands up to 167 feet tall in the Shona era.
Yeah, 50 meters.
I think 50 meters. I mean,
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what I meant is if he stands up to 167 feet tall for the Shona era and some of the Millennium era, but
I know where you're going with this.
But in the US cut, they said he stands over 400 feet tall.
And a lot of the books,
how is that impossible?
Hey! If you saw a kaiju, you might think you might be scared enough to think he's a little bigger than he really is.
Yeah, but that's not true. He's not 400 feet tall.
They also say the Jurassic era was 2 million years ago, so it doesn't quite line up.
Yeah, what is science?
You just gotta roll with it. Gotta roll with it.
Nate with his metric system, 50 meters.
I was going to say
American.
What's funny is people actually thought that must have been a mistake in the dub, and then when the original version came out with the subtitles, it still says 2 million.
This still says 2 million years. They got the height more accurate though, but
the height was correct, but they still said 2 million years. I don't know. Maybe that was like the one moment of these American filmmakers thinking we got to sensationalize this a little bit, 160 feet's not enough.
Either that or the metric system was like, what's that? And they were just like, that's probably 400 feet, right? Let's just put that in. That's a big number.
What it is. Yeah.
And Godzilla has only very rarely gotten close to or cracked 400 feet since in any media.
Godzilla Earth. I think that's it.
Some of the legendary ones have gotten 300 something, but I don't
300.
Hanna-Barbera is pretty tall, but that's
I don't think anyone has an official height for him because his height was. I was gonna say his height was dependent on drama.
Yeah, basically, he's either big enough to hold all of the characters in his one hand, or just one like King Kong and they're sticking out of the top.
And I don't know for the height of Godzilla's cartoon Nickelodeon cousin Reptar is like from Rugrats. I mean,
he's a toy.
Well, he's canonical in the show.
I know.
I don't know if he's ever been given a height. That might be worth looking into. Now I'm curious.
Oh, great. Now Dan is going to be like, I'm going to Google how tall is Reptar. And
I'll Google it afterward. I'll Google it afterward.
I was going to say, then he's going to look it up and it's going to say 12 inches.
The new
on screen, anyways, it's just like when you talk about like King Kong and it's like he's so big or whatever. And it's like, no, he's about that big, actually. You know, so it's like on screen they fooled you, but no, he's about that big.
How tall is Godzilla? About 2 meters.
Yeah. The Cybot though, 16 feet.
That's insane.
Yeah.
No wonder. I mean, did they learn nothing from Kong 76? That thing was like 50 feet tall, and they used it for 2 shots because it couldn't do anything.
It disintegrated. Yeah, they couldn't do anything with it.
Well, didn't they use it in Universal Studios though? Parts of it, maybe.
They may have broken it down for thing. Are you talking about the ride, like the
ride? Yeah.
No, those were scratch built. Those were scratch built.
Were they? Okay. Yeah. I didn't know if they used the John Garriman and what was the guy's name? The
Carlo Rambaldi
version or cut it apart and recycled it.
the guy who built the Kong Encounter and Kongfrontation animatronics was actually Bob Gurr, the famous Imagineer at Disney. Yeah. But
Okay.
Anyway, Godzilla 54.
Sorry.
So I want to talk about Dr. Sarasawa himself. I mean, he was in love with Emiko. They want to get married, but she was forced to get married to Takarada's character.
Yeah. It's the shout out to Akihiko Harada for playing this part. Hilariously, him and Takarada auditioned for each other's roles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was a
and I'm going to tell you right. I'm going to tell you right now. If Harada was Ogata and Takarada was Sarazawa, would have been a really different movie.
Yeah.
I can't imagine either one of them playing any other characters but those.
And I discover how he lost, why he got the eye patch, and that I think they said that he lost his eye during World War II.
Oh, it's a war injury. Yeah.
It's something I thought about. I actually last year, as part of the GNP, wrote a little kind of sort of Sarazawa backstory where I describe him getting hit with a mine on a Pacific island. And I made that up, but it seems likely. I was thinking, how would he get that injury? What's the most likely thing? And I would probably stepped on a mine and shrapnel hit him.
Shrapnel, yeah.
That makes the most sense. It's never said outright, but it is said in the Japanese version that if he hadn't been in the war, he wouldn't have gotten his scar. So it is definitely a war injury. And probably one of the reasons he's as reclusive as he is.
The thing that's interesting about Sarazawa in this movie is that it's a subversion of the mad scientist trope, because he looks like he should be a mad scientist, but he's anything but a mad scientist. If this was an American film, he would have been a raving villain. And with the eye patch and everything, and he's not. The eye patch is there to make him a sympathetic character.
He would have been Dr. Mifune.
Well, which is hilarious because that was also Harada, and he was brilliant in that role too.
Daniel, you missed a big opportunity for GNP that Sarazawa actually was faking it the entire time. He just was wearing the eye patch.
He's doing it to get girls, man. That's the girls love the eye patch.
And it's still him, but he really secretly faked his death too, survived, and joined the Red Bamboo.
No!
I'm taking notes.
It was the other eye. It's the other eye.
Right.
But he was faking the eye injury, so he just swapped it.
Well,
isn't that
he's got to get he's got to balance it out. He's had it on one side for too long that he's got to get that.
He's got
I swear I saw a Mythbusters where they tested this idea that pirates, we always imagine pirates wearing eye patches, but that apparently that wasn't because they would lose their eyes doing piratey things. It was because they would cover up the eye so that at night they could switch the eye patch and they would have really good night vision.
Yeah.
And they actually tested it and it works.
It works. So listen, Sarazawa wears an eye patch over this eye for, 15 years. And then he fakes his death. He switches his eye patch over here. This eye is all messed up. He hasn't seen out of it for 15 years. And then, take another 10 years, get him to the mid-60s. Now he's with the Red Bamboo, and he can see out of this eye just fine, and he's balanced it out. That's genius. It's canon, I tells you. Goofiness.
But no, you were talking about the love triangle.
The love triangle.
Yeah, that is such a fascinating aspect of this because it's because you have a very traditional form of courtship that's running up against the more modern take on a more Western take on it, because Ogata and Emiko are a bit younger than Sarazawa is. And the fact that she's supposed to marry Sarazawa is because the parents arranged for that. That's a much more traditional way of doing things in Japan. The parents arrange the marriages. But Emiko and Ogata are actually in love with each other, and they are, and they're secretly in a relationship. That concept wasn't really a thing in Japan until the Americans occupied the country after World War II, and because that's how they practiced their courtship. So a lot of Japanese young people started doing that because of the American influence. So you have these two ways, these two very different traditions just coming up against each other in this and creating dilemmas for everybody involved.
Yeah, and I wanted to talk about how he came up with the oxygen destroyer. Like, he created this to destroy oxygen, but
it was by accident.
Yeah, but he realized he created a most powerful weapon, and then he done a test and he showed Emiko, and then by throwing it in a tank full of fish, and it was. Yeah. But they didn't show it until another flashback revealed the secret.
Until later.
Yeah, and
which I actually think was a very smart idea, because we just see Emiko's reaction and we're like, what did she see?
Yeah, and
what did she see? And then when we actually see later what she saw, I think it actually amplifies the shock.
Yeah, and then I love how when she turns and closes her eyes and lean on Sarasawa's soldier, it's like, and then Sarasawa's like, yeah, I just love that shot. It's just so cool. And then, but he wants to keep it a secret, and no one wants to know the powerful weapon he created because it's too dangerous. And then, but Emiko broke his promise because he wants to use it to defeat Godzilla. And
so by the end of the movie, you end up, there are three dilemmas that the characters are facing. Emiko has to choose between two different men. Yeah. Characters are trying to decide if Godzilla should be killed or studied. And Sarasawa has to decide if he's going to use the oxygen destroyer or not.
Yeah, I mean, and I love that the human fights, when he was fighting over for the oxygen destroyer, saying, "We must use it."
Yeah, that's a good little tussle. That's also the moment where very clearly Sarasawa realizes that his fiancée does not love him. Mm-hmm. You can see that moment on his face when he sees Emiko tending Ogata's wound. Yeah, there's guilt there because he realizes what he just did was like, whoa, I would never do that. This isn't me. But it's also fully sinking in, like, this love triangle just lost a vertice. Like, this is not going to happen.
Yeah, that was just a broken heart. It was like what he had done. He's like, what have I become?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like he doesn't want to be a mad scientist. He's terrified of being a man. He doesn't want that. He just wanted to live alone and listen to his classical music on the radio, and the children singing song in peace. Was this Song in Peace? Oh, Peace, O Light Return.
It's like
prayer. Yeah, that's actually the name of the story I did. I called it A Prayer for Peace after that song.
And then, to be honest, sometimes that song is between that's like between amaze me and sometimes it bothers me in between.
Because it's so sad.
I don't know. Sometimes it got me between annoyed and amazed. I mean, I don't know. It's like
I find it to be a very haunting piece because every time I see that, especially now, I mean, again, I saw the film for the first time as a 6-year-old, so it hit me a little differently then than it does now. I look at that room full of children singing and I think how many of them don't have parents now.
And, and let me get to that. I mean, I know that this was in the film when the children are singing. It's almost like people are reminded in the real world of what happened during World War II after the bombings, and especially the atomic bombs of radiation after after the lives were lost due to radiation poisonings and the deaths, and that's like a little tribute.
It was Godzilla 54 was very cathartic for the original Japanese audience to a certain extent.
Yeah, that's something I never thought of what I just brought up. Is
it's almost like a little what's the word I'm looking for here? A prayer, in a way, a prayer, a moment of recognition for the tragedy within the film, yes, but also the tragedies in the real world that made the film feel like a necessary step in facing what happened in the very real horror that made that film, necessary for processing it in some way. It's one of those moments where the fiction kind of breaks down and you start thinking, man, like, are they singing about Godzilla or are they singing about the bomb? And is making the difference between the two even worth going to? Are they're the same thing? Godzilla's the bomb, right? So
yeah,
it makes you
I think it was a rough day for Serizawa, though. He lost his livelihood. He lost his girl. The TV was on, and the kids were singing that song. And then you just have to wonder, after they shot that with all the kids in that school house, basically theater, after it was all over and such, was someone like, okay, kids, we have some ice cream in the back.
Lighten the mood a little.
Yeah. Oh, wrong timing. Too soon.
Too soon. Cookies and punch in the fellowship hall in that's
and the kids are all sad. The kids are all sad. It's like, that was such a sad song. And it was like, ice cream.
Yeah.
Look under your pews. You all get
ice cream makes everything better.
And I want to say that, I mean, I know Dr. Serizawa has a little bad moment after what he done. I mean, when he decided he wants to use his oxygen destroyer, I mean, he suddenly destroyed his research by burning it because the people in the world doesn't want to know of his creation list. He doesn't want to know about his research.
Well, and there's a very interesting little subtlety that implies a major difference, and I have to thank David Cowlett for pointing this out in his book, which is in the Japanese version, Serizawa basically says nobody should have this. Nobody should have this. But in King of the Monsters 56, he says, I'm worried this will fall into the wrong hands, implying that there are right hands, whereas in the Japanese version, there are no right hands.
Yeah.
Which is really interesting because it is a bit more of an American sentiment at that point, with this idea that, well, there are at least some people who could reasonably use this thing, the implication being Americans possibly, but the Japanese mindset says no, nobody gets this.
Yeah.
So the heart of man is deceitful. He's sinful.
Yeah.
He's going to use this for the wrong reasons. So there is no right hands. Even Oppenheimer, at a certain point before his regret of what he had done, felt like, at least in the Americans' hands, this technology was in the right hands, until later he realized, there is no right hands to have such a weapon of destruction, if you think of it that way. And when he's burning his notes, it's him beginning the sacrifice. I mean, it is the self-sacrifice, because that is his life's work, literally, like he's burning parts of himself, throwing them literally in the fire, which foreshadows his self-sacrifice,
which I think explains why Emiko cries when that's going on. Because I remember the first time I saw the movie, that her crying seemed strange to me, it felt out of place, and it took multiple viewings of the movie for me to understand, okay, she's crying because he's destroying something that he spent a long time working on. It's a destructive thing, but it's something that he invested a lot of time and himself and energy, a lot of himself into. So it's almost like she got this inkling of what was going to happen in the next scene.
It was the death of a dream in
Yeah.
some ways, but it was, at least that's how she saw it. But the uplifting part of what is ultimately a very tragic and sad, but like mostly like, not yay, we killed the monster ending, but a little hopeful. If there's any hope to be gleaned from it, it's that Serizawa I always envisioned in my head as a man who dreamed of peace and hoped he could bring peace to the world through whatever humble scientific methods he might be able to bring to it. And this isn't the way he wanted it to happen. And ultimately the version of the dream that he wanted, if he didn't do what he did, it was going to become a nightmare. And he let that part of the dream go. But in the end, he was able to bring peace. And it just wasn't the way he thought. So that part of his dream had to pivot. But I think in the end, Serizawa, if he really did dream of peace, if he really did want his existence to mean something when it meant in relation to the benefit of mankind and bringing peace to them and protecting them in some way, but he succeeds. It was at the cost of his own life, but he does succeed. But in a way, in that moment when he throws his notes in, it's like a part of him dies right then and there. And I think you're right. I think that's what Amika was picking up on, and it is a very powerful moment.
It was, and I mentioned before that there are several dilemmas that the characters face in this, and Serizawa solves all of them with one decision.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's the fascinating thing.
Good screenwriting.
And wow, we're only at 2 hours and 25 minutes.
Oh my goodness.
Only, he says, only. Okay, all right. Everybody, strap in. This is going to be this is going to be a power trip episode at 4 hours minimum.
No.
All right.
No. Dear God, no.
No. Well, I did have a few things I want to talk about. I mean, it's the scuba diver scenes that are trying to find Godzilla to destroy with the oxygen. When Takarada and Serizawa, when they're wearing the scuba diver suit, they're actually they actually wear those on a very hot day, and get this, some of the people just pour buckets of water on them and before filming. I mean, to help them cool down and
yeah,
and it's so amazing. Like when they shot when the bubbles rise on the surface and the oxygen destroyer was fired, and then it shows you can actually see some water pouring on the boat and all that, and Godzilla pops off for one last war, and I'm just so amazed how they show his skeleton. I mean, that was just a prop.
Mm-hmm. It's an effective one too. They did the old Wolfman cross dissolve to get that to work. It's good.
Yeah, and I love how Dr. Mifune.
You mean Serizawa?
Yeah.
Yamane.
Yeah,
Yamane.
Oh, Yamane.
Gives this speech and saying that if the nuclear test continues, then somewhere around the world another Godzilla may appear.
Yeah. Which it was one, if I remember correctly, that was one of the parts cut in the US version.
Yeah, it's cut out.
Yeah, it was cut in the US cut, but when he mentioned it, another Godzilla did appear in the Shona, and
he was proven right.
Yeah, but then in the Heisei, 30 years later, another Godzilla did appear in the Heisei.
Godzilla just keeps showing up, and that speech is ingrained in my mind forever because contrary to what some people will say, it was absolutely not a sequel hook. That's not what it was supposed to be. Not at all. It was looking at the audience and basically saying, wink, wink, hydrogen bombs are still a thing. And, and I'm saying wink, wink to say it was subtle, but it wasn't subtle, not at all. And that to me is one of the most amazing things about Godzilla as a franchise, because if you take that first film as the beginning of however many continuities, right? Godzilla comes back as, sequel wise to this film 1 year later in 55, 30 years later in 84, GMK is a sequel, Against Mechagodzilla is a sequel. Like, it just keeps happening. And the inevitability of Godzilla is a concept that I find fascinating because it doesn't matter if you think he's gone. He's not really gone. If he dies in Destroya, Junior comes back. If you blow him up in GMK, his heart is still beating. Godzilla is inevitable as long as we don't learn our lesson.
Yeah, because he keeps coming back, sequel after sequel, and after reboot after reboot.
Yeah, and speaking of Yamane, can we pause for a second to admire the awesomeness that is Takashi Shimura?
Of course.
Yeah.
Who at one point was christened the greatest actor in the world.
End quote the New York Times. What was that? Was that for Rashomon? It was for Rashomon. No, it was for
Seven Samurai.
Rashomon or Akiru? Was it Rashomon?
Oh gosh, it was either Akiru or Seven Samurai. It was either Seven Samurai or Akiru, and now I'm
and that's the thing. He was a part of Toho's stable of actors. He was really well known for making Kurosawa films, and the man could break your heart. Like, I dare anybody to watch Akiru and not cry because Takashi Shimura will wreck you in that movie. It's incredible. Also, if it's, for people who are not as well acquainted with Kurosawa, the fact that they find out that this little modern drama was made by Kurosawa, that might blow their minds because they tend to think of Kurosawa making period pieces. But my word, the fact that this man is in several Godzilla films is always a treat because he is one of the most fantastic actors to grace any screen in any country.
And being in Godzilla films was not beneath him. Being in Toho special effects genre films, even as small of a part as he might have had in something like Gorath, or I'm trying to think some of the other small
Frankenstein
roles.
Conquers the World.
Frankenstein Conquers the World.
Oh my gosh, he's actually kind of disturbingly awesome in Frankenstein Conquers the World if you think about the context, or even when he was the wacko psychologist who's going to give electroshock therapy to Saldo. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Actually, I just watched that movie today with my god kiddos, and I was calling him Dr. Necktie.
Dr. Necktie.
I don't know where that came from. I was like giving them all silly nicknames, and my little 5-year-old godson was like, "Where's Dr. Necktie?" So I got him.
That's great, but the fact that it's a small role, so he's only in a few scenes, and he's delivering these lines. It was like, "Oh yeah, electroshock therapy would be a great idea right now."
I think she might be from Venus, y'all. He's great. The 54 film has such a beautiful cast. It really does.
Well, we should mention the actress for Emiko too.
Yeah,
Momoko Kochi, who actually didn't act much after this.
There was this role. This role did it because she was. People would point at her on the street and you're from Godzilla. You're the Godzilla girl. She was only in a handful of movies after this, and then stepped out of the public eye and obviously came back for Destroya. But that was bad.
The only other movie of note that I know she was in after this was Half Human, but Half Human is got an asterisk next to it because it's buried.
Buried and all that stuff.
Yeah, she was in Mysterians.
Well,
she was in Mysterians. That's correct. Yeah,
she has quite a good role in that. But yeah, she could have really had a good career as a Toho staple studio actress. That you saw in subsequent Godzilla and special effects films that Toho was cranking out. But yeah, she just kind of fell off the map. And which was unfortunate, but you're right. I guess it's typecasting, just like in America, you can get typecasted out of acting. And but yeah, the fact that some of these actors did not consider sci-fi genre films to be beneath them, that's high art, that's high drama, and that's for the A-list actors, and this is beneath us. But of course, being under a studio system, you're not going to get that as much. Once that dissolved, then you started getting the more elitist style actors, or at least you saw actors who needed to pay a few bills, and they'll take any role. So
I think that started to shift in America. Probably, I want to say around the 80s. I think maybe the late 70s, but definitely by the 80s, it had really shifted over, and you had big name actors who are like, "Oh, you're gonna make a Batman movie? Well, I'll be in that."
Right.
I mean, Jack Nicholson had established himself as a very prestigious actor, and Batman rolls around. He's like, "Yeah, I'll be the Joker," and then an icon is born. So
right,
yeah. Well, we're just about that time, and then I want to. There's one more last thing I want to talk about: Godzilla's war. I mean, how is it created?
By the brilliance that is Akira Ifukube, who composed for this movie. So yes, it took a musician to make this roar.
Yep, he was the Godzilla sound effect creator, but before that, they were gonna have Godzilla silent because he's a reptile related.
Yes.
Because some reptiles don't have vocal cords.
No reptiles have vocal cords. In fact, when was it Tanaka, Danny, went to Ifukube and said, "Hey, can you make a roar for the monster?" And Ifukube, he was like, because he loved animals was one of his hobbies, and he's like, reptiles don't have vocal cords, they can't roar. And he's like, I don't care.
Yeah. So they actually use like a leather glove and like a little guitar instrument,
contrabass.
Mm-hmm. And it was one of the only, if not the only, contrabass in Japan at the time, and it was in crappy condition. It had one string. It was at oh my gosh, I don't remember where it was, but at one of the, like, a music institute in Tokyo had this thing, and Ifukube showed up there, coated the glove in resin to make it a little bit more rigid, and then just slid it a couple of times up and down the string, and then recorded it with the reverb and pumped it through a few machines, and the rest is gonna say it.
Yep,
the most iconic sound effect ever made, potentially. It's
I actually saw a YouTube video where a guy actually replicated the process, and it doesn't sound exactly like the sound effect, but the foundation of it is definitely, you can hear it. It's definitely there.
Ifukube was the master at this stuff. He knew woodwind. He knew wood instruments better than most other musicians in Japan did. In fact, his knowledge of wood specifically and its special acoustic properties got him recruited by the war effort. So he was brought in to study wooden airplane parts during the war, and nearly died because he contracted radiation poisoning. His knowledge of wood actually made him a commodity during the war, and then after that, he took that knowledge and used it to make some of the best soundtracks in motion picture history, and B, created the roar for this lovely gentleman here. Pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Okay. And what was also interesting is that he loved Western music.
He did.
Wow.
Yes, he did.
Yeah, it wasn't just Japanese stuff. Like he just loved music. So he was studying Western composers from Europe, because he just like, I have to know more about music. He was self-taught. He didn't have formal training.
Yeah, and he studied music from around the world. He attempted to replicate it. During the war, he was consulted as to whether the Disney film Fantasia should be shown in Japan or not, because it's like, well, is this going to hurt morale to show the Japanese that the Americans can make something so beautiful? And Ifukube said, it absolutely will, because this movie's a masterpiece.
Yeah, it is. I gotta watch Fantasia.
Fantasia's Fantasia's so good. But nobody in Japan in the 40s knew that, because it was ultimately decided that no, like if it's determined that Europeans can make something so beautiful, maybe we'll let them see that after the war.
That would be so crazy. He's like, we can't kill the Americans. They made Fantasia.
With all of this beautiful European music and like from across the board. And it's interesting. might wonder how things might have been different if Fantasia was brought over, specifically because there might have been a little bit more dinosaur media in Japan as a result, because of the dinosaur sequence.
Yeah,
a lot of their dinosaur media had to be imported. The Life magazine, the picture books, all that stuff was imported from the U.S. And you have to wonder if they had a little bit more. Maybe they would have looked at Fantasia as a closer reference. For God, I don't know.
They would have used Chernabog as their Godzilla.
There you go.
The giant mountainous devil.
Dun 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 dun. Yes.
Yeah. And I gotta say, folks, that we're just about that time, and wow, this is like a 2 hour and 39-minute episode. This is like the longest episode I ever done, even longer than my King Kong.
That is how you reboot a podcast, right?
Yeah. Well, there you go. But for Danny, this is just a sprint. He live streamed for 7 hours once.
Yeah. I'm still recovering and seeing a doctor for that. It will probably never happen again. That was it was fun, but I'm tired.
Yeah, well,
seeing stars.
Yeah, well, I want to thank you all for joining me on my episode, and Nick Adams, I'm glad to have you back on my show, and it's been a while, and so I'm glad I did this reboot episode of my very first podcast episode I did. That one's only a 38-minute episode, but this here is a 2 hour and 40-minute episode. This is like the longest than my previous ones. So and I finally did it. I finally refreshened my very first episode I did.
Thank you for including us in this reboot. Like, this was a lot of fun, wonderful movie to start it out with. It's always a pleasure to come on here with you and hang out. We're all good pals here. And to talk about a great movie, celebrate 2 years of an awesome YouTube show, 70 years of a character we all love, and we thoroughly broke a length record. So I think it was I see this as an absolute win.
Yeah, and we couldn't, and we wouldn't had our one of our channel shows without this awesome kaiju.
Yeah. So just to let all of you future guests of Brendan's know, good luck topping this.
Yeah, and thank you all for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more podcast episodes coming soon. And when we wrap this up, I just want to say in Japanese, sayonara.
Sayonara, folks.
See ya.